covers 2 community boards. I was wondering why it was 1 when I knew it should have been in 2. Okay.
You probably are. That's
Got it.
This is crazy.
No problem.
We'll start in 2 minutes. Okay, welcome, good morning, and welcome to the City Planning Commission public hearing. And Madam Secretary, please begin.
Good morning. This is the City Planning Commission public meeting held in Spector Hall, 22 Reese Street. Today is Wednesday, June 17, 2015. As a courtesy during the proceedings, we ask that you please turn off all cell phones and beepers. All speakers should fill out a speaker's card at the desk outside of Spector Hall. In addition, we ask that those providing testimony please identify yourself, limit your remarks to 3 minutes, and speak clearly into the microphone. I will now call the roll. Chairman Weisbrod.
Here.
Vice Chair Knuckles.
Here.
Commissioner Besser.
Here.
Commissioner Cantor. Commissioner Cerullo.
Here.
Commissioner Delausse.
Here.
Commissioner Dweck.
Here.
Commissioner Edie. Commissioner Efron.
Here.
Commissioner Jung.
Here.
Commissioner Levin.
Here.
Commissioner Marin.
Here.
Commissioner Ortiz. A quorum is present. The first item is the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of Wednesday, June 3rd, 2015.
On the minutes, may I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing no opposition, the minutes are approved, Madam Secretary.
Scheduling. On calendar numbers 1, 2, and 3, we have resolutions for adoption. Scheduling Wednesday, July 1st, 2015 for a public hearing to be held in Spector Hall, 22 Reese Street.
On the resolutions, may I have a motion to approve? Second. All in favor? Any opposed? Hearing none, the resolutions are approved.
The next part of the calendar is the report section on page 3. Borough of Manhattan, calendar numbers 4 and 5 concerning PROMISA. These items have been laid over. Borough of Manhattan, calendar number 6, CD 8, C150248ZSM, in the matter of an application for the grant of a special permit concerning the Hospital for Special Surgery, West Wing addition. For a favorable report on calendar number 6, Chairman Weisbrod.
Yes.
Vice Chairman Knuckles.
Yes.
Commissioner Besser.
Yes.
Commissioner Cantor. Commissioner Cerullo.
Yes.
Commissioner Delausse.
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck.
Yes.
Commissioner Efron.
Yes.
Commissioner Jung.
Yes.
Commissioner Levin.
Yes.
Commissioner Marin.
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz. A favorable report has been adopted on calendar number 6. Borough of Manhattan, calendar number 7, CD2, C150146ZSM, in the matter of an application for the grant of a special permit concerning 41 Great Jones Street. For a favorable report on calendar number 7, Chairman Weisbrod.
Yes.
Vice Chairman Knuckles.
Yes.
Commissioner Besser.
Yes.
Commissioner Cantor. Commissioner Cerullo.
Yes.
Commissioner Delausse.
Yes.
Okay, Commissioner Dweck?
Yes.
Commissioner Efron?
Yes.
Commissioner Jung? Commissioner Levin? Commissioner Marin?
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz?
Yes.
A favorable report has been adopted on calendar number 7. Borough of Queens, calendar number 8, CD7, C150173, PPQ, in the matter of an application for the disposition of one city-owned property concerning S&L Aerospace Metals. For a favorable report on calendar number 8, Chairman Weisbrod,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Knuckles,
Yes.
Commissioner Besser,
Yes.
Commissioner Cantor, Commissioner Cerullo? Commissioner Delauss?
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck? Commissioner Efron?
Yes, and happy
Commissioner-
to see the expansion of manufacturing jobs.
Commissioner Jung?
Yes.
Commissioner Levin?
Yes.
Commissioner Marin?
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz?
Yes.
A favorable report has been adopted on calendar number 8. Citywide, calendar number 9, N150302ZRY, in the matter of an application for an amendment of the zoning resolution concerning the special regulations for neighborhood recovery. For a favorable report on calendar number 9, Chairman Weisbrod.
Yes, and before I'd just like to say these proposed zoning changes are focused on certain areas where there are a great number of severely damaged buildings that are facing extreme difficulties in documenting their legal non-complying or non-conforming status prior to Superstorm Sandy. These documentation issues are delaying and even preventing the elevation and reconstruction of these badly structurally damaged one- or two-family homes. This zoning amendment will speed up the process for owners of Sandy-damaged buildings to obtain building permits for elevation and reconstruction, and will reduce their vulnerability to future flood events, as well as protect property owners against higher flood insurance premiums. It also removes disincentives for property owners to make resilient investments and establishes a new zoning envelope so that rebuilt buildings, rebuilt homes better fit into the visual character of the neighborhood. This responds to Mayor de Blasio's mandate to increase our resiliency and epitomizes our commitment to streamlining government to make it work better for the people we serve. I really want to thank the Office of Housing Recovery, Amy Peterson, its director, the Department of Housing Preservation and Development, for working with the Department of City Planning on this proposal. And I'd also like to thank the affected Queens, Brooklyn, and Staten Island community boards, borough boards, and elected officials for their input on this matter, and I enthusiastically vote aye, Madam Secretary.
Vice Chairman Knuckles?
Yes.
Commissioner Besser?
Yes.
Commissioner Cantor?
I'd like to associate myself with the chair's remarks. Thank you. Yes.
Okay. Commissioner Cerullo?
Yes.
Commissioner Delauss?
I'd also like to associate myself with the chair's remarks, and I just say anytime that we're able to put our heads together to reduce bureaucracy, while at the same time also reducing climate risk for homeowners is a good thing. I vote yes.
Commissioner Dweck? Yes. Commissioner Efron?
Yes.
Commissioner Jung?
Yes.
Commissioner Levin?
Yes.
Commissioner Marin?
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz?
Yes.
A favorable report has been adopted on calendar number 9. Borough of Staten Island, calendar number 10, CD3 N150286, RCR, in the matter of an application for the grant of a certification concerning Johnson Street for adoption on calendar number 10. Chairman Weisbrod?
Yes.
Vice
Yes.
Chairman Knuckles? Commissioner Besser?
Yes.
Commissioner Cantor?
Yes.
Commissioner Cerullo?
Yes.
Commissioner Delauss?
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck? Commissioner Efron?
Yes.
Commissioner Jung?
Yes.
Commissioner Levin?
Yes.
Commissioner Marin?
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz?
Yes.
Calendar number 10 has been adopted. Borough of Staten Island, calendar number 11, CD1 N130142ZCR, in the matter of an application for the grant of a certification concerning 57 Willis Avenue for adoption on calendar number 11. Chairman Weisbrod?
Aye.
Vice Chairman Knuckles?
Yes.
Commissioner Besser?
Yes.
Commissioner Cantor?
Yes.
Commissioner Cerullo?
Yes.
Commissioner Delauss?
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck?
Yes.
Commissioner Efron?
Yes.
Commissioner Jung?
Yes.
Commissioner Levin?
Yes.
Commissioner Marin?
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz?
Yes.
Calendar number 11 has been adopted. Borough of Staten Island, calendar number 12, CD2 N150304 ZCR, in the matter of an application for the grant of a certification concerning 60 Louise Lane for adoption on calendar number 12. Chairman Weisbrod?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Knuckles?
Yes.
Commissioner Besser?
Yes.
Commissioner Cantor?
Yes.
Commissioner Cerullo?
Yes.
Commissioner Delauss?
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck?
Yes.
Commissioner Efron?
Yes.
Commissioner Jung?
Yes.
Commissioner Levin?
Yes.
Commissioner Marin?
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz?
Yes.
Calendar number 12 has been adopted. Borough of Staten Island, calendar number 13, CD3 N150296 RCR, in the matter of an application for the grant of a certification concerning 178 Foster Road for adoption on calendar number 13. Chairman Weisbrod.
Yes.
Vice Chairman Knuckles.
Yes.
Commissioner Bessa.
Yes.
Commissioner Cantor.
Yes.
Commissioner Cerullo. Commissioner Deluz.
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck. Commissioner Efron.
Yes.
Commissioner Jung. Commissioner Levin. Commissioner Marin.
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Yes.
Calendar number 13 has been adopted. Borough of Staten Island, calendar number 14, CD3 N150298 RCR, in the matter of an application for the grant of a certification concerning 324 Robinson Avenue for adoption on calendar number 14. Chairman Weisbrod.
Yes.
Vice Chairman Knuckles.
Yes.
Commissioner Bessa.
Yes.
Commissioner Cantor. Commissioner Cerullo.
Yes.
Commissioner Delauss.
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck. Commissioner Efron.
Yes.
Commissioner Jung.
Yes.
Commissioner Levin. Commissioner Marin.
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Yes.
Calendar number 14 has been adopted. The next part of the calendar is the public hearing section on page 10. Borough of the Bronx, calendar numbers 15 through 18. Calendar number 15, CD1 N150287ZRX. Calendar number 16, C150288ZMX. Calendar number 17, C150289ZSX. Calendar number 18, C150344ZSX. A public hearing in the matter of applications for amendments of the zoning resolution and the zoning map, and for the grant of special permits concerning Tres Puentes, 285 East 138th Street.
First speaker is Jennifer Steinberg. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for seeing us and considering our project. I have wonderful assistants that are going to bring up our boards. We have our executive director, Laura Jervis, and our principal architect, Amy Shakespeare. So to give you a little bit of background about Tres Puentes, Wistfish acquired the property in 2011. It contains one existing building, 145 units, all governed and controlled by the project-based Section 8. So we have permanent affordability there. The building came with 1.8 acres of additional land. On that land, we're very lucky to have that. On that land is what we're going to be building Tres Puentes. Yeah. So we have here this three-wing building. It's the existing 145 unit ranking court. We're going to be building 122 units on this west building and 56 units on the east building for a total additional units of 178 units. 100% of the units will be affordable. 139 of those 178 units will have project-based NYCHA Section 8, so they'll be extremely affordable. The remaining units will be under 60% of AMI. We plan to fill this building with amenities, both for the residents as well as for the community. On the east building, we're going to expand the existing senior center at Rankin Court. We're going to have an additional 3,000 square feet or so of that senior center to add to the about 4,500 square feet existing. That will be an amenity for the entire community. On the west building, we have a large anchor space at the corner, which will really activate that site. And we're going to have smaller commercial that will go up towards 139th Street and hopefully form a connection to the hub. We would really like to activate that space because I think it's a right corner for it. It's also, we have a 6th train access right here, so it'll be a great amenity both for the community as well as for our residents. These will be 100% senior units. We think it's very important to provide them with active outdoor space. Between the west building and Rankin Court, we will have a roof deck as well as an outer court, which we've retained a landscape architect to help us with those sites. We'll also have outdoor space on the east building that will be accessible for the senior center. So I think we'll, in sum, we're going to have this whole site be affordable for seniors. We're going to have a lot of amenities both for the community and for the residents in terms of both community facility for the senior services as well as the commercial space along the west building. So I'm happy to take any questions you may have about the site.
Questions for Ms. Steinberg? Ms. Efron?
Thank you. Just one question. Are there covered walkways to all the amenities for the seniors
That's a
currently
great
as
question.
designed?
That's a great question. We will have covered walkways. This will be an entire campus. So on between the West Building and Barranquilla Court, the covered walkway will be on the first floor. That will connect both entrances, so you could access all the amenities throughout the building, both the senior center, and I should have mentioned there will be a lot of community space for the residents exclusively. We're going to have community rooms both in the new building as well as in the existing building, and connecting the east building and Barranquilla Court will have both a walkway on the first floor as well as on the second floor. They will all be enclosed, not going to have to go outside to access the space.
Thank you. Any other, Star Stage, Screen and Television, Ms. Delos?
How are you? I just want to say this is a very exciting project, and congratulations on the project-based Section 8.
Thank you.
I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the other sources of financing for the project, and what difference, if any, that you see in terms of who you'll be serving for the new buildings versus the current building.
Great question. The sources of financing, we're going to be applying for HFA bonds, which will allow us to access two additional sources of funding. One, the Medicaid redesign team funding, which we intend to cover approximately 35 units, as well as the 4% tax credit. So that's going to cover a huge percentage of the financing. The remaining financing will come from HPD. The borough president has already committed $1 million to the project in the executive budget. We will be contributing our own equity through the deferred developer fee. And unique to this site, which I should have mentioned, it is a brownfield, which we remediated as part of our Barranquilla Court work. And what that allows us to access is brownfield cleanup program tax credits at about $5 million. And in terms of the difference in population between Barranquilla Court and the residents that will be living in the new buildings, we really do hope to mirror exactly what we'll have here. Because of this original population, because of this original regulatory agreement, this building is going to be 90% seniors and 10% physically disabled. So we hope to mirror that and really not have very much difference between the populations in each building, but they will all be obviously low income. They will majority be seniors. We will not have that exact restriction since that is so specific because this was a former HUD 202, but we do hope to mirror it.
Thank you.
Mr. Knuckles?
Thank you. The upzone, proposed upzone from R6 to R7 obviously gives you a larger FAR. I'm just wondering, how many additional units would that yield?
How many additional units would that yield if we were to fully build out from the R6 to the R7?
To the R7?
You can get back to us on that.
We'll absolutely get back to you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Ms. Levin, and then Ms. Efron.
Yes, thank you. This is a really exciting and complicated project that I think started with some architectural challenges that I hope we can hear about because it seems like you've come to a good solution on a very challenging site. But I'd like to ask about the commercial and the community facility space. Do you have tenants selected for those? What are your thoughts about who might go into those spaces? And in particular, how successful do you think the commercial space in the mid-block building will be?
Absolutely. So
It is next to a police station, so perhaps there's a lot of donuts to be sold, but
we have the police station. This little bit of gray here is the 40th police precinct, and we're happy to have them and all their cars on the community facility. We are working right now on a contract with DIFTA for the Department for the Aging. We anticipate that they will provide the funding, and WISFISH will provide the services for that senior center. Now, the commercial will all be in the West Building. We have already started reaching out to a number of groups. The ones that we're most excited about, and what we really would like to happen both programmatically for our residents and for the community, is we're reaching out to federally qualified health centers to try to get them interested in the site. We've already engaged in 3 3 separate potential partners and are working with them to try to work out the lease. The remainder of the commercial spaces, we have retained a commercial broker for those to help us market them. Actually, the same commercial broker that we're continuing the map would be right across 3rd Avenue and is helping that. So we really hope to be able to provide complementary uses for the new commercial coming in. In terms of what we hope to provide, we hope to provide a mix of both national and local retailers. Some of the people that we've reached out to thus far, 7-Eleven, local pharmacies, type of uses that will really be a benefit to the community, things that they need. We've heard a lot from the community board about what they're looking for. They love uses like that. They love the health center. They would love a bank that has low fee structures there. So we really hope to be reaching out to those. We do, since we are going to be along 3rd Avenue, we do think it'll be a very successful. We hope it will be a very successful site. When we talk to the broker about it, it feels that it's very positive, both in terms of the traffic flow as well as the 6th train being right at the corner of our site. We also have a huge flow of traffic to Western Beach, which would be right up here. So we hope to capitalize on that as well.
Ms. Efron.
Sort of a speculative question, and it's not one intended to cause you to spend any money in architect's fees, but the commission on Monday heard about possibly reducing the parking requirement for senior housing. Is it your sense, or would you like to comment on how different the project would be without that?
Absolutely. I'm more than happy to talk about it. So the East Building is actually... How's this? Better? Okay, great. The East Building is actually being built on our existing parking lot. So we have on the site 33 spaces. We are going to take away 23 of those to build the East Building. So, in fact, if we were required to have those spaces, the entire East Building would not be here. So that's the first thing that I'd like to say. The second is that when we were originally thinking about having 20 spaces on the site, right now there's only going to be 10 spaces that are part of the existing lot. When we were thinking about having 20 spaces on the site, the only other logical place for those 10 spaces is this strip back here. Right now, our architects made this a gorgeous, well-utilized space where the tenants can sit outside, they play dominoes, benches, landscaping, the whole 9 yards. That space would have to be taken away entirely for parking. So we feel that the site plan in general would be much worse for wear if we had to have the additional parking spaces. Thank you.
Just to pursue that, I assume you don't know yet, particularly specifically who your tenants will be, but based on your experience, is your assumption that very few, if any of them, will actually be car owners?
That is 100% correct, based on our experience. Right now, of the 33 spaces, 8 are taken up by the residents, and we charge them $25 a month. So we imagine if we were charging what would be the going rate in the neighborhood, which based on the lots nearby is about $150 a month, that number would be reduced significantly. So of 145...
You mean fewer of the residents would actually own cars?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So currently on this site, 8 out of 145 tenants have cars. Or it's 145 units, about 160 tenants have cars. So we feel that is a much greater amenity to be able to provide more units as well as more outdoor space.
Thank you. Any other questions for Ms. Steinberg? Thank you, Ms. Steinberg.
Thank you so much.
Is there anyone else who wishes to be heard on this matter? And if not, the hearing is closed.
Borough of Brooklyn, calendar number 19, CD2, N150356, BDK. A public hearing in the matter of an application concerning the formation of the Metro Tech Area Business Improvement District.
Before we call our first speaker, I do want to acknowledge that we have in the audience today a group of students from the NYU Institute of Real Estate, and they're Professor Barry Hirsch, and I had the honor of teaching at the Institute some years ago, but failed to be as creative as Professor Hirsch and did not bring my students down to see reality in action. So I commend him and students for coming here today, and hope you learned something. And if you do, let us know. And with that, let me call our first speaker, Blaise Backer from the Department of Small Business Services.
Good morning, Chair Weisbrod and Commissioners. I'm Michael Blaise Backer, Deputy Commissioner of Neighborhood Development, the Department of Small Business Services. I'm joined here with by Chris Goddard and Patrick Kamek from our bid team, and I'm here to testify in support of the expansion of the MetroTech Business Improvement District into the Brooklyn Cultural District. As the oversight agency for the city's bid program, SBS oversees the bid formation and expansion process and serves as an advisor and resource for bid expansion steering committees. SBS will only introduce bid proposals into the legislative process if we believe that the steering committee has followed the planning process correctly, solicited robust community input, and has sought to collect and demonstrate broad-based support across all stakeholders. Speaking specifically to the Brooklyn Cultural District, it has been an important priority of the de Blasio administration to develop a mechanism by which to ensure the proper maintenance of the public investment into the area's public spaces and sidewalks. Because there are already 4 bids abutting the Brooklyn Cultural District, and given both the small geography and the number of non-assessment paying properties, SBS determined that the expansion of 1 or more existing bids was preferable to creating an entirely new bid. We have been working with the Expansion Steering Committee for over a year on this project. SBS initiated a very inclusive process with many stakeholders, including DBP, Fab Alliance, which is the bid on Fulton Street in Fort Greene, Clinton Hill, and many of the cultural organizations and large local property owners, on developing the precise boundaries for the 2 bid expansions to ensure that the entire cultural district was covered. The Expansion Steering Committee proceeded to hold numerous meetings, and SBS attended all of them to ensure the administration's input was being incorporated. We are encouraged by DBP's extensive outreach effort to the residential and commercial community, and of the responses received, there was overwhelming support and very little opposition. Obtaining high response rates is always the most challenging component of bid formation and expansion process, particularly of residents and non-locally owned retailers, such as is the case with the tenants of the Atlantic Terminal Mall. Considering the high proportion of documented assessed value support, the transparent and inclusive planning process, and exhaustive outreach efforts to all stakeholder groups, SBS determined that the bid expansion proposal was ready for CPC submission. We also support the bid's commitment to growing the residential and community board's participation in the organization's governance by increasing the number of residential board members, bringing the community board back onto the board as a Class C member, and creating a residential advisory committee. It is important to note the existing MetroTech bid is one of 13 bids in New York City, so almost 1 of 5 of the bids currently in existence, that explicitly assesses owner-occupied residential property in a similar way as commercial properties. Also, of the 30 bids that use assessed value in their assessment formula, almost all of them, so 26 of 30, assess full mixed-use lots as MetroTech's formula does. One more note is that utilizing assessed value within the bid's assessment formula results in a significantly reduced assessment for residential tax lots because commercial use properties typically have much higher assessed values. It's also important to note that while not here to testify today, the bid expansion proposal has also received written letters of support from Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams, Council members Lori Cumbo and Stephen Levin, and Community Board 2. I'd just like to acknowledge before I take questions, I am done, but we do have a number of representatives both from DBP, residents, culturals, and others here to answer questions that I might not be able to answer.
Thank you, Ms. Backer. Questions? Any questions for Ms. Backer? Ms. Efron.
Since you mentioned the low response rate, could you just give your theory about why it is so low and how perhaps SBS or the bids themselves could increase that in the future to make sure that, as transparent as the process is, that the outcome is one that most neighbors buy into?
Sure. So DBP will address sort of the precise numbers I have in sort of different stakeholder groups, but I think in this particular case, as I touched on, so with retail tenants in particular, I think when you look at locally owned businesses in the expansion district, actually the numbers are completely in line with our past experience. It really is sort of the national chains in the mall that skew the numbers on the retail side because getting a manager to sign off for a national chain and up the chain of command, to our experience, just doesn't happen. Yeah. On the residential side, I think we've looked back at our records to find what is sort of past common practice, and there actually, for many years, residential support wasn't documented as carefully as we do now. But I think if you look back, while it is slightly lower, it is not significantly lower, and I think largely, again, because just, getting residents, again, if they're tenants, it's hard to get their buy-in in a process that they may not feel as fully invested in. For owners, I think this is where I think they did get support from 2 of the 3 boards of residential condo properties, but getting documented support where someone's actually, signing, a statement of support, especially in this case where it's an average of $117 a year, I think was just difficult in getting people to actually put that in writing.
Thank you.
Sure.
Ms. Levin, then Ms. Ortiz.
I was going to ask a question that, Carl, was actually the same one that you asked at the review session, so I don't want to step on your question, but. And that has to do with the composition of the board, given the sort of geographic spread of the area now, and with quite different characteristics between the 2 sub-areas. So how is board governance, how are the various constituencies going to be represented within the governing structure? Will there be proportionate representation by the north sub-area and the south sub-area? And what are SBS's thoughts about how to manage that relationship in a situation like this?
Sure. So again, Tucker will probably get into that in more detail, but I can say that we addressed that early on, and that's something where the board obviously will be expanding to a certain extent, and certainly representative geographically, but also, in the sense that there are now, culturals and some new, very, considerable sized properties being developed in the Brooklyn Cultural District. The board is being expanded appropriately to ensure that there's geographic representation as well as, different types of classes. Then I know both the cultural organizations are forming sort of a committee of the board that will be informing particular programming in the public spaces. And then again, the residential advisory committee I mentioned earlier will be made up and will be reporting to the board as well.
Ms. Ortiz.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
Sort of on the question of cultural institutions, I think we're really pleased to see that cultural institutions are contributing, a small amount to this assessment. And we also acknowledge that this is in many ways, it's a cultural improvement district as opposed to a business improvement district. And I wondered if, you had any information about, the amount of property in this area that's really dedicated to cultural uses. I mean, that property is not assessed, so, they I guess ballots, they don't have to fill out ballots per se, and it's not counted. But how did, can you speak to how they will be engaged in a way that's appropriate, and perhaps, to what degree we can engage them in perhaps contributing more to this proposal?
Right. Well, so I believe there are, over 60 culturals now located in downtown Brooklyn, and 9 of those are within the Brooklyn Cultural District. So, as in regards to the planning process, they've been engaged from the very beginning, and we, both SBS as well as certainly the steering committee has been speaking to them regularly. I think the offer of sort of a financial contribution was an idea that came out of the cultural organizations themselves. I think the real big piece of their contribution here is the sort of programming component, which is where their expertise lies. So given that there are 4 public plazas being created in the area, their contribution to leveraging existing programming and putting it into public spaces for everyone to access is sort of the real contribution in this effort.
Okay, so an in-kind contribution could be.
Yes, it is. I don't know the value of that contribution. It might be something someone can speak to, but it's certainly something that is a large piece of the conversations that have happened.
Thank you.
That's not insignificant.
Did I understand correctly that the culturals will be represented on the board, or is?
Yes. I don't, so I think, yes, I know they will be. I think the question, I'm not sure exactly what class they'll be occupying, so obviously some that are tenants of government property will probably be on the board, but in a non-voting capacity. Just But I think there's, essentially there will be a committee with the chair of that committee sitting on the board.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Backer? Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Next speaker is Tucker Reed from the Downtown Brooklyn Partnership.
Good morning, Chairman Weisbrod and Commissioners. Thank you
morning.
for the time today to discuss the expansion of the Metro Tech Business Improvement District. I'm Tucker Reed. I'm president of the Downtown Brooklyn Partnership. We're a local economic development corporation that is managing the agent for 3 bids in the area: the Fulton Mall Improvement District, the Port Livingston Skirmahorn bid, and the Metro Tech bid. For 3 years, the Downtown Brooklyn Partnership, at the request of various stakeholders, has explored the formation of a business improvement district to cover the areas of the Brooklyn Cultural District and the Atlantic Mall, Terminal, and Center. To be frank, given the history and the area's complexity, it's a wonder that we're here today. These 10 blocks are surrounded by 5 separate bids. All told, these neighborhoods have been the focus of over $100 million of public investment over the last decade, and the area is currently undergoing a major construction boom to complete the long-planned Brooklyn Cultural District. The next 2 years will see an addition of 300,000 plus square feet of new commercial office space, including the first new office building in downtown Brooklyn since the area's rezoning in 2004. Over 1,000 new residential units, 9 cultural institutions, over 1,000 square feet of brand-new street-level retail, and close to 32,000 square feet of public plaza, including 4 city-owned spaces at Fox Square, Times Plaza, the Arts Plaza, and the Southside Plaza. The expansion area also encompasses highly trafficked Atlantic Center, Terminal, and Mall, as well as the busy DeKalb Avenue corridor leading from Brooklyn Technical High School to Flatbush Avenue. The expansion area consists of 22 tax lots and is bound by DeKalb Avenue to the west and Atlantic Avenue to the east. The incredible variety of uses poses unique challenges when it comes to fairness, as there are numerous exempt properties because of the cultural institutions, limited commercial density, and new residential development compounded by a preponderance of public space. To ensure fairness, a steering committee comprised of 25 diverse area stakeholders, including property owners, business owners, residents, cultural groups, and representatives of Community Board 2, was formed to guide the creation of this maintenance entity to provide for these invaluable assets. This wide array of stakeholders is represented by individuals who volunteered here. We'll speak later today. The steering committee was exhaustive in its exploration of a fair and equitable plan and worked closely both with the existing Metro Tech bid board and the Department of Small Business Services. After exploring a myriad of different formulas, the steering committee decided to utilize the Metro Tech assessment formula, given the long history of its effectiveness and fairness. The committee undertook an extensive and transparent outreach process to ensure current property owners, residents, and business owners understood the value of this expansion. We went door to door along DeKalb Avenue, worked with the condo boards to communicate with tenants directly, held digital office hours utilizing the residential building's internal networks, and met personally with who was willing to talk with us. All told, we received support of 90% of the total commercial assessed value, 74% of the mixed use value assessed, as well as 86% of the exempt properties, which include nonprofit and government. Understanding that this area is primarily a residential area, the steering committee intends to take several steps to ensure that the areas are met and their voices are heard. Which I'm happy
2 more sentences, Mr. Reed. Why don't you stop there? And questions for Mr. Reed? Mr. Cirillo.
Tucker, are you thinking about taking any steps to ensure the proper representation of all the diverse classes that you have in this proposed bid expansion?
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Shirley. Yeah, I mean, obviously, this is a very diverse district, but I would imagine increasingly across the city, you all must be encountering situations like this where the preponderance of mixed-use districts are really popping up to support the 21st century city. And it's one of the reasons that we looked to the Metro Tech bid board composition, because it already had representatives of not only both commercial and residential property owners, but major educational institutions, both Long Island University and City Tech, are major members of the Metro Tech bid board and write in-kind checks to contribute to what goes on there every year. So I think we actually have a very good base to build off of. And so we'll have to add in the cultural piece too now as well, but in downtown Brooklyn, we're used to partnering with our cultural institutions very closely. So.
Ms. Delausse, then Ms. Ortiz.
Hi, Tucker, good to see you. Congratulations to getting to this point.
Knock on wood.
I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit, I don't know if you're the right person to speak to this, or maybe some other folks that are here with you. Given the four public plazas that are part of this, and given the fact that there's also the plaza in front of Barclays, can you talk a little bit about what relationship, if any, there might be between the Barclays Plaza and the other four plazas?
Yeah, happy to. Hopefully a lot. The cultural groups have, obviously there's been a lot of work going on in this area long before the bid is formed. The cultural groups got together 2 years ago and with Cultural Affairs and DOT went through a fairly extensive streetscape planning process that culminated in the adoption by the PDC of a new streetscape plan. Right, what's different about this district than many other cultural districts you find in a campus format, the beauty of this is the diversity of architecture and venue sizes, and spaces, and so the groups really felt in order to knit it together, there needed to be a uniform streetscape to help do that. So that streetscape, and the beauty of that is also much of it will be built out by developers who are building new buildings in the district. So that process has already started. Some of the elements actually very much complement the plaza in front of Barclays Center. There's embedded lighting. The pigment tint to the concrete is fairly similar. And then further to that, I think the most important part here moving forward is going to be the programming to unite the district together. It's great that all these cultural institutions have performances inside, but our real goal in doing this is to help to draw that creativity and energy out into the streets. And we have these great venues in the form of these public plazas to do that. So the cultural groups are actually now going through another planning process to really put together, I won't call it a business plan, but a sustainability plan for the district that will look very closely at programming for the area.
Thank you.
Ms. Ortiz.
Hi, good morning. You mentioned an issue of fairness. I think it's something we've been grappling with in thinking about this. The cultural institutions will benefit from, management of the space outside of their properties and perhaps driving more traffic to them over time. And they are making a voluntary commitment. Is there, thought will there be some sort of formal commitment? Will there be an MOU with the cultural institutions? I imagine that, as a bid management entity, you want to ensure that you understand your budget, and your cash flow from year to year. And, to what degree is there commitment, in writing?
Right. So I will let my colleague Andrew Kalish, who will speak at the end here, address any of the specifics that come up around. I will say, one, we plan to write into the district plan the contributions from the cultural organizations, which will be in kind, but they're also, 5 of them are going to contribute $10,000 a year, which for many small Brooklyn-based cultural institutions, it may not sound sizable in the scheme of New York City, but for us in Brooklyn, that's a pretty heavy contribution. And so it'll be memorialized in the district plan, and we also have letters of support from them. They also can't go far. We know where they all are every year. But beyond that, anything, even an MOU wouldn't be enforceable beyond the district plan. But if that's a suggestion, we're happy to entertain trying to enter into an MOU with the cultural groups. I'll let them talk to whether they'd be interested in that.
And just to follow up on that, is the construct here that the cultural organizations in the district will be providing free programming on all of these plazas at various different times, and that will be managed by the Downtown Brooklyn Partnership, or that will be a direct or will it rather be a direct MOU between the cultural institutions and the bid itself?
Yeah. So for one, the cultural institutions have agreed to provide in-kind performances and programming. There's only 5 of them that are in the footprint. There are 9 total. Some of them, we probably won't do glass blowing per se on the public plaza, although maybe we'll figure out a way to do that. But even with 9 institutions there, we'll want to draw on the larger community of downtown Brooklyn cultural institutions, of which there are 60. Probably be a lot to ask 9 of them to program year-round. So our programming plan is still in formation, but the groups in the area, I mean, even more so than the local business improvement district does, are very eager to get out into those plazas and start programming them. But if you have suggestions about how you'd like to see that more formalized, I'm sure we'd be happy to do that.
Well, I don't think it's our mandate or jurisdiction
Sure.
to determine or even to suggest how spaces within the bid and within the cultural sub-district are programmed. That's really up to the bid itself, obviously. I think it is of interest to us, given the cultural thrust here, that that it be formalized in some fashion. And I think what you're saying is that it will be formalized in some fashion through an MOU between, whether it's the bid or Downtown Brooklyn Partnership, and very specific cultural institutions, and what specifically each of them will do, obviously subject to change from time to time. Is that a fair
Very fair synopsis. I would
synopsis
say,
of what you're
you
going to
know,
be doing?
We, in the past, when we managed the bid, I mean, we usually defer to the district plan and what's memorialized there, but we're happy to craft an MOU, and it probably makes sense to capture the commitments from the cultural institutions a little more formally.
Well, I'm just the district plan is a fairly formal document that is somewhat more difficult to change than an MOU between the bid and the various cultural institutions, and it seems to me much more appropriate to do that through an MOU than through a district plan that, because necessarily the programming is going to change from time to time.
No, I think that makes total, that's the advice we always get from SBS.
Not surprised. Ms. Efron and then Ms. Ortiz.
Thank you. Just building on a few other comments about the nonprofits, there are some world-renowned cultural groups within this sub-district, and based on their success, there may be some more additional ones coming, and some of them have fairly large budgets, numerous employees, and they will be drawing quite a few theater goers and performance attenders to the space, which seems to me to be the perfect opportunity for the bid. Just wondering if there's been any discussion about basing future voluntary contributions based on size or attendance or other metrics. And I ask you this as much about this particular sub-district as other future bids and expansions of current bids.
Thank you for that question. My honest answer to that is no, we have not contemplated yet what would happen if a major cultural institution came in with a, tens of millions of dollars of annual budget. We would welcome that opportunity to talk with them about opportunities for programming and contributions to really knitting the district together. I can't, maybe our friends from the cultural institutions will speak to this. Getting everyone together to agree to get us to this step was a gargantuan task. And it's probably not reflected very well here today in my testimony, and that's my own shortcoming. But this really took us 4 years of very sustained effort to even get to this point, to this baseline agreement. And I think it's great to now have this foundation to build off of for when new institutions come to the neighborhood, they know that a commitment has already been made by the existing folks here. We don't have to start at square one again. Say, look, if you're going to come to this cultural district, there's an expectation that you will contribute to it in some way. And it actually is also very helpful with the development community that's building there. And it allows us to say to them, look, this is a special place. It's been recognized by all the stakeholders here. And if you're going to build here, you need to really consider the architectural, the cultural contribution, the type of community facility that you're going to bring to the neighborhood. So we haven't fully fleshed out the answer to that, but I'm hoping that we're going to continue to work on it.
Thank you.
Ms. Ortiz.
I think we're thrilled that, you're here. I think, even the precedent of the contribution is significant, and perhaps, what we're getting at, I think, is this is somewhat precedent setting. As you said, we're going to see more of these mixed-use districts. The legislation is called a business improvement district, but we're seeing many more mixed-use communities, and so perhaps this is an opportunity to weigh in and think through it a little bit more. I think that's one of the reasons why, when I think about what a bid is, I think about, managing the space outside, the public realm. basically. And, you know, like in malls, every tenant contributes to a common area maintenance charge, and because it's an occupancy cost, you know, and in some ways, the bid, I see being in this district and they're having a bid, you know, being an occupancy cost for everyone, not just those who pay taxes, but, you know, the nonprofits as well, and cultural institutions who, as we said before, will benefit. So, you know, I guess the push on this end is, you know, can we think through some way that reflects the true value that they're receiving from this? And it's not for you to push, per se, maybe it's our opportunity to push in thinking through how we ensure that, yes, absolutely, there's an expectation that if you're part of something like this, you benefit from it, and benefit from it, you also contribute. And, you know, can that contribution be tied back to the value that you actually received? You know, the assessment, presumably the value of a property, is how you define the assessment, but we have no comparable metric on the cultural side, and, you know, we're getting at the size of the institution or the number of staff, or, you know, just to throw it out there, and maybe this is a much bigger conversation than right now, but, you know, how do we set maybe a best practice based on some of what you started, which I think is a great start. You know, so I think that's mostly what we're getting at.
Understood. And I will say, I'll just throw a couple metrics at you that maybe help in your future thinking about this, and I understand we're kind of wading into uncharted territory here, so while we appreciate the opportunity to be a trendsetter here, the burden is a little heavy on us. But I will say, so two things in defense of the culturals, which hopefully my friends at BAM remember this next time we have a little bit of an argument about these things. But the cultural institutions themselves, I mean, I think the reason that the property owners in the area are willing to enter into a maintenance entity like this, maybe carrying the burden a little bit for some of the cultural institutions, is because the cultural institutions in downtown Brooklyn draw 4 million cultural visitors to the area a year. We completed an economic impact study last year, and we were able to determine that the cultural groups, just the 60 that are in downtown Brooklyn themselves, have a $350 million impact on our local neighborhood. So those are massive numbers. So you can, in a lot of ways, you can argue that these institutions are punching well above their weight in terms of their economic impact for the neighborhood, and it's not always measured in the amount of property tax they're paying. But I would argue that in terms of the amount of economic output, they're an incredible asset. And they've drawn beyond that, and then you start to think anecdotally about the developers that are coming to the area and recognizing they want to be here because of that clustering of cultural groups. And I'll close just on that part just by saying that, you know, we are focusing very much on the cultural institutions, but there are 260 tax lots in this expansion area, and the cultural groups only represent 9 of them. So there is a cultural component, but I wouldn't even call it in the top 3 of major stakeholders in the area.
I think what you're hearing is a question that is broader than this particular application, and we see bids obviously all over the city, and all of them are doing extraordinarily great things, and all of them are increasingly in mixed-use districts that create both new opportunities and new challenges. That one of the things that makes managing and overseeing a bid an exciting and ever-changing responsibility, as at least Mr. Cirillo would attest, and many of us who've been involved in this would attest. But one of the things that we are seeing is that bids are increasingly facing the issue of how to maximize districts and the potential of districts that are have several different kinds of uses: residents, cultural institutions, commercial businesses, and the like, and how all of those both contribute to the economic and physical potential of the area as well as benefit from what the bid can do is, I think, the issue that we're all trying to see if it can sort out. And it's going to change over time.
I can completely sympathize because it's the exact process on a micro level that we've been going through over the last 3 years. So I offer my sympathy, and also I offer hopefully, and obviously we know our relationship with the commission and the city agencies doesn't end today, and I mean, please use us as a resource for information, or keep checking in on us to make sure that this new structure kind of works. We're very confident that it will, and it's really the reflection of a lot of compromise between numerous stakeholders in the area over a lot of time.
Be careful what you wish for, Mr. Reed.
We love the City Planning Commission in downtown.
Any other questions? Mr. Cantor.
Sir, I've been on this commission almost 20 years. You're the first one who's ever said you sympathize. My question would be, if, you're talking about the major contributions that the nonprofits are making to the area. But conversely, the area is making contributions to it in the way the area is providing funds to it by virtue of these 4 million people that are coming. Is it possible for you to differentiate or delta out the value to the nonprofits so that you have a basis to ask the nonprofits to be more direct in agreeing to contributions?
So that's a good question. I mean, we can just look at our budget for the first year, and you don't have to look at it, but I'll just tell you that our assessment for the first year is about $550,000 that we're looking to collect.
That's the sub-district.
Correct. I'm only talking about the sub-district, sorry. The cultural contribution will ratchet up over time, but will represent about 10% of that total budget. And if we look at the number of tax lots that the cultural institutions are occupying, it's far less than 10%. So in some ways, I think you could argue that the cultural institutions, between their monetary contribution and their in-kind programming, are probably actually contributing above the level that they would if they were assessed.
Ms. Levin, then Ms. Zhang, then Ms. Ortiz.
Yes, the focus of the conversation has quite properly been on the culturals, but the other dynamic element in this expansion area is a growing residential population. And I wonder if you could tell us how the bid, pursue the same line of inquiry about the increase in the residential population. How are your services changing to address the fact that we've got many more residents there? Obviously, the sanitation and security services that are provided by the bid benefit everybody in the district. But are you complementing your services to support those residents? Are there jobs programs? Are there hiring programs? Are there other things that you're doing to recognize the change in the population?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I can't talk to this specific district yet because we're not providing
Right.
service there, but for our 3 existing bids, I'll tell you, we're going through our budget process for fiscal year 16 right now. And we have recommended to the boards a 30% increase in our sanitation services, just to give you an example, just to keep pace with the amount of growth that we're seeing in downtown Brooklyn. One of the goals our bid boards have set for us is to be the cleanest bid in the city. In order to do that, particularly with the amount of new stakeholders coming to the area, it's put a real strain on our resources, and so we're having to increase assessments to keep up with that residential growth. Luckily in Metro Tech, where we're seeing a lot of that growth, there is an existing residential assessment, so those new residents will help contribute to the strain on the resource that we're experiencing.
Ms. Zhang.
Hi. So I have sort of 3 questions. One is, again, on the residential side, while the response may be low, I'm wondering whether, just based on the process, you feel that certainly the participation in the assessments will not come as a surprise to people, even if they didn't actually take the step of responding. And then, I guess sort of related to that, I was curious about what your digital office hours entailed. And then my third question is, this is, again, located in an area that has some grid capacity issues. It's sort of the next area in Brooklyn that's likely to sort of have a lot of attention around the electric supply. And as representing such a large commercial constituency, I was wondering if you would share your thoughts on sort of the Downtown Brooklyn Partnership's approach on sustainability.
Sure, thank you. So going in reverse order, in terms of the impact on our local utility service level, what we have seen is a number of utilities in the last couple of years, I think largely because of commercial office growth that they were really shocked by. Time Warner, Optimum, a number of others have laid a whole bunch of additional service in the area to keep up with the expansion and growth. One of the great things about downtown Brooklyn is that there's already a preponderance of infrastructure to support growth, right? Between the transportation infrastructure, 13 subway lines, 15 bus lines. The grid that is existing there has not experienced any strain, and our friends at Con Edison don't tell us that they expect anytime soon. Where we did have a bit of a problem was on our broadband access. Although MetroTech was actually built with extensive broadband access back in the late 90s, we're one of the few neighborhoods that has it. But in areas, particularly the connections between, say, the Navy Yard and downtown Brooklyn, where we've really tried to build connections, Time Warner went out and laid over $20 million of new infrastructure over the last couple of years. So I think we work very closely with a lot of the utilities. Some of them sit on our boards, and I think they really recognize they get access to that regular feedback loop of what we're seeing in the marketplace, and so adjust their service provision accordingly. In terms of, and I will just make this last point, we plan to launch a new program this year. My staff has really been pushing us on this to try to reduce trash levels. So we're going to launch a green campaign that's really focused on the residential buildings around recycling, composting. I tried this a number of years ago in Dumbo and didn't make it very far, but I think the world has changed a lot over the last 10 years, and one of the biggest constraints or drains that we're seeing on our services is just keeping up with the trash collection. So what trying to an education campaign and doing what we can to really get into those buildings and provide some education to the local residents about the impact of their trash habits on those street life is something that we're going to really focus on in our upcoming fiscal year. Our digital office hours, a lot of these new fancy residential buildings have platforms to transmit messages to all the residents, so you no longer have to pick up a piece of a slip in your mailbox or depend on the doorman to let you know what's going on. There's actually a very robust social network that it exists on many of these platforms and these buildings. God forbid a streetlight ever gets knocked over, that bounces around that social network on that building for days and days and days until it gets resolved. So we offered first of all, we communicated pretty thoroughly through those platforms to those building owners about the bid coming online, and also offered up opportunities both either in the lobby or to answer questions via email or phone, digital office hours, saying contact us during these times if you have any questions or concerns or would like to discuss it further. And then I think the final point you asked was on outreach, correct? So there are 3 condo buildings in the district, in the expansion district as it is composed today. I think Blaze mentioned that 2 of them had the condo boards had actually signed letters of support. We attended condo board meetings at all 3 of those buildings. I think generally we were talking about, and this is just my opinion, you can draw your own conclusion, but we were talking about something that was so non-contentious because we were asking for $100 a year. And many of these buildings, $100 a year to them doesn't really mean very much. And so, rather than take the time to fill out the form and follow up with us or interact with Andrew, I can guarantee you that if they had a massive problem with this, our boards are very active. The council member would be here today, I'm sure, telling you why she thinks this is a horrible idea. And the fact that she's not, I know that's trying to prove a negative, but it's probably a good indicator that there wasn't overwhelming angst caused by this.
Sure. Issue. So I'm not 100% sure, but I seem to recall that there was actually a preliminary filing made with the Public Service Commission, about this particular area, actually this entire area and going down into Red Hook sort of being Con Ed's next area of grid concern. And I don't know whether, Downtown Brooklyn Partnership has, any anticipated role in conservation efforts around electric use generally, but it's, because you have such a large installed, constituency, it seems like there might be an opportunity to show some leadership there, and I would welcome learning about it in the future.
Thank you. No, and particularly, I think there's a huge opportunity on that green campaign that I mentioned. But we'll reach out to Con Edison. My impression is that was always south of Atlantic Avenue, which we want to be all things to all people, but not really our area of focus. But I will, regardless of it, if it is impacted by, upcoming constraint concerns, it should be part of our green efforts in downtown Brooklyn.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Ortiz.
Hi, just a point of clarification. I was under the impression that the cultural organizations collectively were contributing $10,000 a year. Are you saying that individually they are, so that becomes 10% or $50,000 instead of 10, or?
So I'm going to let my colleague Andrew Kalis address that when he comes up here. But the annual contribution for the first year is $10,000.
Collectively? Okay, so not 10% of, but I'll wait for him. Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
No.
Any other questions for Mr. Reed?
Just,
Mr. Cirillo?
Tucker, a question about the plazas, just for information purposes,
Sure.
and only because it connects to the potential agreements and relationships in terms of programming. Well, and I know the city, at least according to our report, the city is making there's a plaza contribution in some way to the programming of the plazas. Will these plazas function as privately owned plazas that will be programmed by whoever is programming, or will these be functioning as DOT public plazas under the typical plaza program agreements?
Thank you. So each of the plazas has a bit of a different jurisdiction, of course,
Okay,
because
of
we
course.
make it easy. So Fox Square and Times Plaza fall under DOT's jurisdiction.
Okay.
And the Arts Plaza and the Southside Plaza fall under the Department of Cultural Affairs jurisdiction.
Oh, wow.
So we will be working with both of those agencies to, we've seen this in a number of our other plazas where we've really been pushing for these license agreements that would the city still has jurisdiction, but allows us to more freely program the spaces without having to go through an extensive approval process every time we want to put on a cultural performance.
And so I'll assume then in the creation of those agreements, or the negotiation of those agreements, some of the concerns that the chair had about sort of ensuring what programming would be, or the responsibilities and obligations of all the parties involved in the plaza would become clearer.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Any other, Ms. Delos?
Tucker,
They
sorry,
don't want to
what-
let you leave,
Yeah,
Mr.
sorry.
I'm happy to hang out here with you guys.
Well, you're answering all of our questions. One final question. If you could just talk a little bit about efforts that you are making, have made, and intend to make related to local hiring.
Thank you. So for our service providers, essentially where we're seeing, major hiring takes place on our public safety and our sanitation side. Our sanitation contract is with the Doe Fund, who hopefully their reputation precedes them here, and the extensive work that they do with local New Yorkers on career pathways. On the public safety front, we've actually been really struggling with our attrition rates. It's hard to keep folks because it's really a pathway, right? They come and they spend 6 months a year with us, and then they'll go to the police academy, or they'll go to a higher paying security job for a private company that's able to pay more than a small nonprofit. But we do make a lot of efforts through our friends both at Workforce One and the Navy Yard has a hiring center when we have openings to try to fill them through that. But more generally, it's very important to us that all the companies that are coming to downtown Brooklyn are using the local hiring services provided by the city and by the Navy Yard when they're filling positions. Been, I think, I would say modestly successful at that. I mean, I know this last quarter, we were just preparing our board memo yesterday that we've had about 298 placements this quarter from local residents in jobs in downtown Brooklyn. Rather than recreate the wheel, we depend on our partners in government to provide those services who do a fantastic job in downtown Brooklyn.
Any other questions for Tucker Reed? Thank you very much, Mr. Reed. The next speaker is Ashley Cotton.
Morning, everyone. Thanks for having me. My name's Ashley Cotton. I'm here on behalf of Forest City Ratner, where I serve as a senior vice president. I'm also the chair of the Metro Tech bid and serve on the steering committee for this expansion effort. The proposed expansion includes several of our properties, including the Atlantic Terminal Mall and Center, and the office building on top of the mall. And that makes Forest City the largest commercial property owner in the proposed expansion area. This neighborhood is already one of the busiest in the entire borough. Tens of thousands of people pass through or visit every single day, whether they're going to Long Island Railroad, Atlantic Terminal, by one of the 11 subways and 8 bus lines in the area. And this will continue to be Brooklyn's primary commercial and retail corridor for years and years to come. All this because of the new development in the area and of course, not even all that development is complete, as Tucker's been talking about. Hundreds of millions of dollars of public money has been invested in the area, and it's vital that we figure out ways to maintain these areas in the go forward. Forest City is also the largest property owner in the current Metro Tech bid. Our holdings range from the office towers of the Metro Tech Center and 80 DeKalb, an 80-20 rental building in the edge of the district between the Cultural District and Metro Tech. We've witnessed firsthand the benefit of the Metro Tech bid to both our commercial and residential tenants, from the meticulous maintenance and sanitation to numerous innovative public events produced annually. The Downtown Brooklyn Downtown Brooklyn would not be such an attractive place to live, work, or visit without Tucker's leadership, his team, and the bids. This area has changed primarily from a commercial center to a vibrant mixed-use neighborhood where residential buildings are dominating the skyline and continue to go up. And in this transition, the Metro Tech bid endeavors to serve this new constituency with care and transparency. The current board includes 2 voting residential representatives, including Ron Cohen, who's here today, who also serves on the bid's executive committee, and a representative from one of the area's large rental towers. As part of the expansion process, the bid has agreed to include an additional voting board seat for a residential representative in the expansion area, and add a permanent non-voting seat for a representative community board 2, and establish an advisory committee to be comprised of residents from within the bid's boundaries. This last component will ensure residents will have additional lines of communication with the bids board like they already have. Having been involved in this process for close to 4 years, I'll say as Tucker did, it's kind of a miracle that we're here today. Big credit, obviously, to the partnership, but also, I think you'll see through all the testimony, we're a group of stakeholders who actually do work together outside of whether it's in structures that we're talking about today, but we're neighbors, we're partners, we sit on each other's boards already, and I think that that's, out of all the things we've talked about today, the #1 reason why there is real consensus, and we're hoping to have your support going forward. I'm happy to take any questions.
Yeah, Ms. Cotton, thank you very much. I do have a question. The sort of history of the makeup of the board of the Metro Tech bid seems somewhat confusing and tortured over the last however many years. And could you just go through in total what the makeup, not by name, but by category, the makeup of the existing Metro Tech board is, and what it will be when expanded, and how it will change in terms of the makeup. The community board was on the original bid board, then off the original bid board, and now back on the original bid board. Could you just go through that so we're clear on what happened what
Andrew
if,
probably can do it better than me.
I'm sorry?
My history's not that good, though Barry was teaching me in the hallway about 1991. I will admit to not being there, but Barry was.
You don't have to go back that far.
Thank goodness.
But maybe then for you, just so it's clear, the makeup by category of and size of the existing bid board and what it will be in terms of category and size, assuming the expansion goes through.
I'm going to defer, unfortunately, to Andrew. I don't have it in front of me, but he's prepared to go through each one. So obviously, commercial owners, well, I will guess, we'll let Andrew, who's got the cheat sheet in front of him, I think.
Okay.
Sorry.
Ms. Deluz.
Hi, Ashton, how are you?
Good.
I'm just wondering if you could maybe expand a little bit from your perspective, both being on the bid board but also representing Forest City. Really kind of the same question I asked Tucker about the relationship between the plaza at Barclays and how you see that contributing or being a part of the larger effort in the other public plazas.
Sure. So right now, the public programming that happens on the arena plazas, organized actually by me in a big way, and even back at Forest City is just the owner, not an arena employee. So we've done food trucks out there. We did a farmer's market that was unsuccessful out there. It was actually the original location of the first farmer's market in Brooklyn. So Grow NYC was so glad to come back. We just don't think the residential foot traffic is there yet. So these are some of the examples of things we've done. We've also used it, for arena programming related things. So depending on what concert or sporting activities coming up, we've used the plaza for programming that actually relates to that. That's a constant negotiation in a very positive way with the local precinct, given the high traffic at the mall across the street and, frankly, a little crime here and there. It comes actually typically with all malls or maybe urban malls specifically. So we actually, just to be honest, had a proposal in front of the 7-8, the precinct recently, and they asked us not to do it. Depending on, frankly, the high school and middle school kids, they'd be happier to do it in the summer than during the school year. Again, just want to be totally honest. So that programming is something that, it's a very new, very large, very high traffic public open space that we, have tested a bunch of concepts with and will continue to. Times Plaza, which the bid will maintain, is a much, obviously, smaller place. It's really a pickup and a drop-off for buses and vans and a, safe place to find refuge as you cross big, big streets there. So we'd be happy to bring more programming there when appropriate. And that's really a constant negotiation in terms of public safety.
So, I guess in particular, are you envisioning potential cultural programming in addition to what other things you're already doing or you're thinking of doing?
Another example, the Beat Festival, which is a downtown Brooklyn arts organization without a physical home, though. They have done performances. This fall will be the 3rd year we host them there, and again, free of charge, and we do all the maintenance and everything. So there is precedent for that, and again, it's just always finding the right balance.
Thank you.
Questions for Ms. Cotton? Okay, thank you very much.
Sorry.
Good to see you.
Sorry to pass it on to Andrew.
Sorry for him. Next speaker is Keith Stubblefield from Brooklyn Academy of Music.
Yes. Good morning, Chair Weisbrod and Commissioners. My name is Keith Stubblefield. I'm the Chief Financial Officer of BAM. We're the largest cultural institution in the Brooklyn Cultural District, in fact, in all of Brooklyn. And we will have 3 facilities located in the MetroTech bid expansion, the Peter J. Sharp Building, the BAM Fisher, and the new BAM Karen that's currently under construction at the south site. The development of this area has been in the planning stages for decades, and it is exciting that in 2 short years, most of the construction will be completed. BAM has been an anchor in Fort Greene for more than a century and has a long history of neighborhood engagement. We work very closely with local elected officials, community groups, and other local partners to ensure that the residents of the immediate area have consistent access to BAM's excellent programming. Beyond that, we are deeply involved with neighborhood issues and advocacy. One of my own staff members, Tamara McCaw, has been serving as the inaugural chair of the Fab Alliance bid since its inception 5 years ago. Through that experience, we have direct knowledge of how bids can be hugely beneficial for all stakeholders. BAM also serves on the board of the Downtown Brooklyn Partnership and has been very pleased with what the organization has accomplished these past few years. Thank you, Tucker and Andrew. Throughout the planning process for this expansion, BAM has a seat on the steering committee that was referred to earlier. Equity among stakeholders was always at the forefront of the conversation. As an institution that's deeply rooted in the community, we were impressed with the transparency and delicacy of these outreach efforts. And given that there are so many different for-profit, nonprofit, and government landowners in the proposed bid expansion, all of which we've talked about earlier today, this negotiation did not offer a simple solution. BAM and the other cultural groups in the area understand we will be beneficiaries of this effort and have agreed to collectively contribute $10,000 annually to the BID's programming budget. Furthermore, we will provide our curation and production expertise to develop top-quality programming in the area's new public spaces, and we look forward to working with area stakeholders to further develop these plans. The MOU that was referred to earlier, BAM would certainly be willing to sign something. You know, where we have a vested interest in the success of this bid, probably I could say more than any probably for-profit developer in the area. We've been in this neighborhood for a century, like I mentioned. You know, in the 80s, we were the only people bringing visitors into this neighborhood, frankly. So we sort of see it as a really nice mutual relationship. You know, we've created an environment where for-profit developers can now come in and do their thing, and we know that we're going to benefit from them. So as Ashley referred, they sit on our boards, we sit on their boards, and it's actually quite a nice symbiotic relationship that's going on. So BAM and the other cultural groups, I don't really speak for them, but I can certainly speak for BAM. I fully support this effort and respectfully ask that you approve the expansion plan.
Thank you very much. Can you just clarify for me?
Sure.
And you talked about that you would provide your technical expertise to putting on productions. Is that, my assumption is that at least in some of these open spaces and plazas, you would actually put on productions. Is that of various, and program the space? Is that what you anticipate?
Sure. I mean, we have the Dance Africa Festival in the neighborhood right now. It's the largest festival of its kind nationwide. We would love more space to do that in, for example.
And that would be outside available to the public for free?
Of course, sure.
Good. Thank you. Mr. Knuckles, Ms. Efron, and Ms. Ortiz.
Mr. Stubblefield.
Yes.
Right. You said collectively a $10,000 contribution.
That's correct.
That's not the aggregate, that comes from each,
That's
or,
That's 2,000.
collectively, yes, a total of $10,000. Let me just speak to that, if I may.
Please.
It may sound like a small amount of money, but the political environment with the other culturals in this neighborhood is very complex. BAM is by far the largest organization in this neighborhood, but the other organizations really want to step up and be an equal partner with BAM in endeavors such as these. So we have to figure out a contribution amount that's going to be equal for everyone. At least that's been the plan so far, and that's what was agreed upon by all the parties involved.
do you foresee that increasing with the presumed success of the bid extension?
You know, certainly without committing us to anything, it's pretty early on, to be honest. I mean, I was just at a 2-hour planning meeting yesterday. You know, we have yet to see the largest plaza is not even really under. You can't even see what it's going to be yet. So we have a few years to go. But of course, with the success of it, and as the demand for more programming grows on it, we're going to be more involved. It's right across the street from our main building, the Southside Plaza. So. As I said earlier, we have just as much, if not more, interest in having this be successful than anyone.
Ms. Efron.
Thank you, and I think everyone on this commission would acknowledge that BAM has done an enormous amount and has been really holding its own out there in changing Brooklyn for most of the rest of the other boroughs. I'm just curious if you can tell us how much BAM is contributing of the 5,000, and also if you can give us a sense of your budget and the budgets of the other nonprofits, just so we have an idea of the scale. I understand tax lots have been discussed, but your tax lots are larger in size than most of the tax lots.
Actually, our buildings are owned by the city, actually. So to be clear, it's $10,000 collectively, right? That's you mentioned 5,000.
I'm sorry, 10,000, yeah.
$10,000 collectively. We were At one point, there were only 4 institutions, so we were contributing $2,500 each. I think now there are 5, so it would go down to 2,000. That's the level there. You asked about the size of our budget. The current fiscal year is about $54 million. I can't really speak to the size of the others.
Thank you.
Yep.
Ms. Ortiz.
Hi.
Hi.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm curious about the process that you went through to sort of make a determination as to contribution. I understand these things are a challenge, and you guys are forging a new path in many ways, and I'm excited to see that, and really pleased that you recognize the value of this kind of organization. But, did you look at other sort of best practices and how, there are examples of similar organizations nationwide where cultural institutions participate, and there's, a contribution or assessment was, how did you eventually arrive at this particular?
And frankly, I want everyone to understand that this is an assessment for the first year that we're really talking about. So when we were in a group with Andrew under the Downtown Brooklyn Partnership leadership, the other culturals and I agreed that as far as seed money, that's really how we are looking at it in our own minds. What kind of seed money would be a good faith effort to put forth, and it's the amount that we came up with. No, I don't think we really were looking at a lot of other examples. I mean, as has been mentioned here, this is kind of a new territory here in New York, so we don't really have a lot of local examples to draw from, and I think it's going to be a very organic thing that sort of evolves over time.
If I may, there are numerous sort of cultural and tourism improvement districts nationwide that have models that, may be of interest later on, and in particular associated with the small ticket surcharge. That is a different way to approach it as opposed to an assessment that then allows some of those costs to be passed on to the visitor, who ultimately is partly why we're doing this.
Of course.
So, there are models out there.
And I think as this whole thing progresses, again, we're sort of in the middle of heavy construction right now for probably the next 2 or 3 years. So as things really develop and they're fully functional, I think we're going to look at those things and sort of try to adopt the best practices there.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Let me just see if I understand what I think you said implicitly, if not explicitly, but I'll say it explicitly if this is accurate, which is that there are various cultural institutions of various sizes in the district, of which BAM is obviously by far the biggest.
That's right.
And the others are relatively small, but that as a group, and perhaps driven by the smaller cultural institutions, there was a desire to keep the contributions equal in order to assure that each cultural group had a seat at an equal seat at the tables, as it were.
That's exactly correct.
And so the $10,000 collective contribution doesn't so much reflect an ability to pay as much as a desire to keep the contribution equal. Is that a fair statement?
That is fair.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Stubblefield? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Ron Cohen.
Good morning, Chairman Weisbrod and fellow commissioners. I'm Ron Cohen. I'm one of 2 residential voting members on the MetroTech bid. I also serve on the bid's executive committee and am a member of the community board too. As a resident living within the boundaries of the bid, I can testify firsthand to the intense focus the organization has placed on the area's growing residential population. As a member of its governance structure, I can also attest that the board does not make a decision without thoughtful consideration of the residents in the area. The expansion of the bid will provide the same high-quality services, not only supplemental sanitation, and maintenance of new public squares, but high-quality programming that has been a tremendous addition to the area. The thought of 9 cultural entities working together is nothing short of amazing and exciting, and will make the area an even more attractive destination to work, to live, and for all of the city and beyond, a place to visit. The partnership, on behalf of the bid, worked tirelessly, as they always do, to ensure all stakeholders in the expansion area were well-informed and heard. This was especially the case for residents. I offered, and this was communicated thoroughly, to speak with any resident in the expansion area to explain the benefits to them of becoming part of this. Unfortunately, no one took me up on it. But I believe that really was the case of the bid's representatives doing a fantastic job of answering all questions and concerns. Unfortunately, due to scheduling conflicts, representatives in the expansion area cannot make it today. Nonetheless, I hold in my hand 2 signed letters of support from 2 condo boards, 1 Hanson Place and 96 Rockwell, 2 condos that demonstrate their support for this effort, and I submit them for your consideration. Therefore, I thank you for your time, and I strongly recommend the commission approve this expansion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cohn. You can give the 2 letters to the secretary. Questions for Mr. Cohn? Ms. Levin.
Again, maybe picking up on a question that the chair asked Ms. Cotton, but as a member of Community Board 2, as well as a member of the bid board, you may be uniquely situated to reflect on the relationship between the Community Board and the bid. We do have a recommendation of approval from the Community Board, but with a condition that the Community Board seat be restored on the board. Are you satisfied that the Community Board's condition will be fulfilled, and do we have any future concerns about the relationship between the Community Board and the bid?
So first, I have absolutely no concerns that this requirement will not be fulfilled. I am sure that, and we've spoken at the Community Board and at the Metrotech bid about this extensively, and all have agreed that this will happen. Okay. And then I forgot, I lost the second part.
Well, I guess it's a unique situation that the Community Board and the bid kind of came apart at some time in the past, and maybe that past isn't relevant. I guess what I'm asking is that past relevant to the future, or can we move ahead expecting that the Community Board bid relationship will be, as it typically is with bids across the city. I sat on a bid board as a representative of Community Board 2 as well. Is that the way it's going to work in the future? Are all the past problems behind us?
I say absolutely. Past problems are behind us. The Community Board will be represented, and I think that there should be no conflicts or problems with that.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Cohn? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Next speaker is David Lambino. Welcome, Mr. Lambino.
Good morning, Chairman Weisbrod. Good morning, fellow commissioners. My name is Dave Lambino. I am the Director of Special Projects at Two Trees Management. Today, I speak to you in my capacity as the Chair of the Steering Committee to expand the Metrotech bid. Two Trees will be the largest residential property owner in the expansion area upon completion of our BAM South project, which is on Lafayette between Ashland and Flatbush. That's a project that this commission is familiar with. We came before you about 2 years ago this month, and were approved, obviously, with that project is well underway. We expect that people will be living in that building by the end of next year. The area included in this expansion effort, as you've heard today, is obviously one of the busiest parts of Brooklyn. With the completion of the development projects that are currently underway in the cultural district, this will be even greater. It will be one of the most unique neighborhoods in the borough, with 9 cultural groups, 4 which will be in our building that we're building, in a city-owned part of that building. There'll be thousands of new residents. We have 400 apartments that we're building. About 90 of those are affordable. And there'll be many new public spaces, including a 16,000 square foot public plaza that we're constructing at our site, that this commission and the borough office, Brooklyn Borough Office at DCP, had a very heavy hand and made some terrific improvements to during our planning process. So this is a tremendous opportunity. As a residential property owner and a strong advocate of bids, Two Trees was instrumental in the creation of the Dumbo bid. We co-chair the Court Livingston Schermerhorn bid, and we believe this expansion effort is vital, not only from a property owner perspective, but as a benefit to our future tenants. We're very sensitive to the needs and impressed with the outreach efforts that Andrew and Tucker have undertaken so far. I think that is clear from the Community Board 2 approval. We attended both those meetings, and they were very enthusiastic about the proposal. We strongly believe the expansion in its current form is the best solution to a very complex issue, one that not only equitably distributes the cost to ensure a great degree of fairness, but also ensures a very high level of service that will benefit the various stakeholders in this area. So I ask you to support this expansion and vote yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lambino. Questions?
Thanks, Ruby.
If I could add one point on the issue of the cultural contribution. When we conceived of this as a steering committee, I think the concept was that it would really serve as a seed, as a line item that was worked into our budget at the beginning, upon which we could build. And we would build not only with maybe additional contributions from the culturals when this was a proven when it was a proven process, but also potentially from philanthropic donations, from landlords, from future retail tenants, that it could really, would serve as really the seed upon, which we could grow something large in the future. Right now, a number of these spaces aren't complete.
We've heard that there is this collective contribution of $2,000 from 5 cultural institutions, which means that 4 other cultural institutions in the district are not going to contribute. Are those the 4 that are in your space, or are they that haven't moved in yet? Or
They haven't moved in yet. We haven't.
Are those the ones that are not?
Those are 4.
Are the 4 that are not contributing?
Yep. We haven't completed the space. We haven't sold it back to the city. And as Keith noted, some of the cultural institutions are better endowed than others. We'll have a number. The Brooklyn Public Library, for example, has extraordinary capital needs. Has a limited ability to contribute at this point to something like this. But may, hopefully in the future when the branch gets up and running and becomes successful. We have a dance group, 651 Arts, in our building, which, has never had its own space. We'll have Mokata, which is making a big jump up in terms of size and, and responsibility and maintaining a much larger space. So it's unclear, how much out of the gate groups like that can really contribute to something like this. But
will they be condos in your building, or will independent condos, or will they be rentals?
Our apartments are rentals.
No, the culturals.
The cultural, it's one condo that will sell back to the city upon completion.
Okay. Ms. Delos.
Hey, David, how are you? Good to see you here. I'm just, you referenced the 2 years ago when we had the approval for BAM South. And if I recall correctly, and you're kind of highlighting it now, because of the size of the culturals, and I don't know if Makata, for instance, was identified at that moment in time as moving into BAM South. I know there were some concerns with at least one of the groups, whether or not they would be able to raise the funds to do their build-out. So I guess my point is, you're hoping, I guess the anticipation is to circle back with the culturals that are in the Two Trees building, once the building's complete, to see what position they'll be in to possibly contribute. Is that the overall idea?
Yeah, I wouldn't suspect that we would take the lead role there. We want to support the cultural groups in our building. If they flourish, it works great for us as well. But I don't see us being the ones to do the outreach to see if they want to contribute to this. I do suspect that as a landlord in the neighborhood that's going to have a large plaza in front of our building, we'll want to see that activated. That was, in a regular and active fashion. That was part of the concept behind the design to begin with, that this plaza would be public and active. It's a very active location. Right next to Flatbush, in the heart of the cultural district. If you want peace and quiet in your apartment, you're probably not going to live in our building here. This is a very exciting corner of Brooklyn. So I think we'll be more involved at the outset of trying to get something up and running in terms of long-term, in terms of programming, long-term programming that works.
Any other questions for Mr. Lombino? Thank you.
Thanks.
The next speaker is David Dalton.
Morning, Chairman Weisbrod and fellow chair members. My name is David Dalton. I'm representing Gem Palm Brokers, which is a small business and also a property owner in the proposed expansion area, and a strong supporter of this effort. Jim has been in his current location since 1982. Prior to that, we were 2 blocks away where the vitamin shop is now since, I believe, 1947. So we're kind of a staple in the community. And we have over 27 locations throughout the 5 boroughs. And with all of our locations, we are actively involved in all of the bids. We have bore witness to the tremendous change in the area, has experienced over the last decade, and there are more people than ever walking down Flatbush Avenue, which is great for business for us. Traffic's at an all-time high, and we're taken aback by how much construction is going on and how fast it's being done. We welcome it with open arms, and all these new people have, again, been great for business, but there are also downsides. We work hard to keep our little area clean, but we could all benefit from the services the bid offers. We see the quality of the service just by looking down the left of Skimmerhorn, where the CLS bid is located. We are also excited to participate in the marketing services provided by the Downtown Partnership. They have already worked closely with us on local events, getting the word out, and in fact, outreach conducted for this expansion has been extraordinary. Never once did we feel in the dark and received regular updates throughout the process. The door is always open and continues to be, and on behalf of Jim, we ask that you support this effort.
Thank you very much. Questions?
Thank you.
You've escaped. Thank you. The next speaker is it Craig? I'm having a hard time reading. Craig Atkins? Atkins.
Yes.
Okay.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. My name is Greg Atkins. I'm the Director of Project Management at Second Development Services, a real estate developer in Brooklyn Heights. I also serve as the Vice Chair of the MetroTech Bid Expansion Steering Committee. Before joining SDS, I was the Chief of Staff to former Borough President Marty Markowitz. Some of you may know him. And have been involved in numerous bids throughout the borough for years, including serving on the board of MetroTech, Fulton Mall, and the steering committee for Courts Livingston Skirmahorn. So I've been involved in these bid formations for a while now. SDS is developing a new hotel on Rockwell Place between Fulton and Lafayette in the heart of the Brooklyn Cultural District, and has been part of this particular bid formation for about 4 years. I have been very impressed, given the wide variety of stakeholders in the area, and I have the political scars to prove it over the years, that we're even speaking for you today. In fact, this effort has gone very smoothly from our steering committee meetings, where the group has essentially been in lockstep as to the needs, benefits, and resources and costs of the outreach efforts, which were intensive, transparent, and comprehensive. One of the best I've seen in my years. My fellow supporters have expressed eloquently the needs of the area and the intensive dedication of the resources required. I echo their assessment and believe that our property, our 201 hotel rooms, and our future guests coming to downtown Brooklyn will certainly benefit from the programming and all the activity that will be happening in the area. With that, I ask for your support and of this effort and vote yes to approve the proposal.
Thank you, Mr. Atkins. Questions? Ms. Efron.
Hi, do you mind telling us approximately how much you imagine the first-year bid assessment would be for your property?
Andrew has that. But I will
He's the
tell you
budget
this,
man.
we know as one of the larger commercial entities in the district that we're going to be carrying a little bit more than, say, the cultural institutions, but we certainly benefit from them being there. I mean, the reason this is such a great location for a hotel is because of all the activity in the area. And actually, I was Marty's chief of staff when we did the 2004 rezoning. And one of the issues that we had talked about in 2004 was the lack of hotel rooms in Brooklyn. Brooklyn is significantly under-hoteled. We only have about 5,000 keys right now in downtown Brooklyn, a city of 2.6 million people. That's over 500 residents per key. Manhattan has 22 residents per key. So we are significant. We have less hotel rooms than your average small city in the Midwest, like Tulsa, Oklahoma, and Brooklyn being the fourth largest city in the world. You can tell I work for Marty, huh?
Yes.
Certainly could use a lot more hotel rooms, and we know we will benefit from the cultural institutions in this area. No mind carrying that extra.
And presumably they'll benefit from you, too.
I hope so.
Any other questions for Mr. Atkins? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next speaker is, all roads lead to you, Andrew Kalish.
The keeper of the budget.
I know you've been waiting with bated breath. Thank you all for having us this morning. I'm just going to walk through. I've heard a lot of questions, and if I missed anything, please, of course, interject. I just wanted to start off in talking about the whole issue of the cultural groups working together. So I've been at the partnership for a year. Before that, I worked at a place where when I started there, 11 cultural institutions were physically tied together. You guys might know that's Lincoln Center, Performing Arts, where I was the Director of Strategy and Business Development. Everyone knows the history of what happened at Lincoln Center, and it's only been recent history that they're actually talking to one another. So to come from that into Brooklyn, into the burgeoning Brooklyn Cultural District, and see 9 groups working together has been nothing short of a miracle. I know that word's been thrown a lot around this morning, but it's true. And these groups get along well, they work together very well, and I was beyond excited actually to see that they came with a proposal of actually contributing dollars and not just in kind. They weren't asked of that. They were asked to just go off and come up with a proposal of how they feel they could benefit this effort. And they came back to the table with dollars instead of just in kind, which most cultural institutions would probably have just done. There are a couple points. I just wanted to go over the 4 groups that were not included in that $10,000 contribution. Dave said 3 of them, which is 651 Arts. Until the South Side is complete, they have been offered free space in the top of the Harvey Theater of BAM, so they essentially have an office that's about a third the size of this room. Mokata, which is a tenant of ours at 80 Hanson Place. This is a big step up for them. They're a very new organization. Councilmember Cumbo founded them some years ago, but in the history of Brooklyn cultural institutions, they're still very young. And then there is also the Brooklyn Public Library, of course, and then Center for Fiction, which will actually be in the BAM North Site 2. That was announced recently. Originally, that site was supposed to be for I-Beam, but because of some cost issues, they had to pull out from that project, and then now they're an industry city. So Center for Fiction is really a brand new tenant. We're still getting to know them. That deal happened very quickly. They have a great budget. They just sold their very very expensive townhouse in Manhattan, so they have expressed a lot of interest to contribute as best they can. What's also really exciting about these plazas, beyond what the bid and the partnership will do, is also the fact that these groups have decided on their own they will program them as part of their regular scheduled programming. So Mark Morris will go out, where they do yoga classes inside, they will go offer those for free of their own volition. BAM will utilize them as part of their normal programming, which we are encouraging. So on top of the things that they will do just as part of their current program that aren't even a piece of what this bid and the Downtown Brooklyn Partnership will oversee. So there will be multiple layers of programming in these plazas. They will actually, beyond the $10,000 and the in-kind contribution just for what the bid will be doing, there will also be the other layers of program that they will be doing on top of that. So, which I think, again, is very exciting. Lincoln Center has 16 acres of prime New York City real estate, and it's rare to have two constituents work together on anything out there. That is a very recent occurrence, mostly due to the work of my former boss, Ren Levy, who you know quite well. So it is a miracle, and it's really interesting. I mean, the fact that yesterday we had a 2-hour planning session with about 25 cultural groups to talk about this is something, again, that would never have happened at Lincoln Center, and I would be shocked to see it happening in Manhattan in general, to be honest. Okay, so we've got that. Public space use. Most of the plazas won't be online, even next year. I mean, you heard Dave talk about how his residents will be moving into the building probably the end of 2016. So we're going to see, so this $10,000 seed money might get banked, we might use it in some capacity, but there will be other opportunities for them to contribute. Again, works well outside. The board makeup. Now, this is a very technical thing, and I just want to read. I have the actual physical makeup of the board. So our bylaws commit us to creating board representation based on property class and the composition of district. This is recalculated every year based on the assessment roll. So the current stance, and excuse me for reading this verbatim, but there's 14 large commercial owners. This is 56% of the board. So that means that there are, we have 25 board members currently. You can go up to 30 seats total. This is just in the current metropolitan area.
Please continue.
There's 14 large commercial owner representatives, so this is 56% of the current board. Overall class pays 81% of the assessment. 2 small commercial owners are on the board. This is 8% of the board. Overall, this class pays 2% of the assessment. 1 large residential owner. This is 4% of the board. Overall, this class pays 11% of assessment. 2 small residential owner. So these are the condos. This is 8% of the board. Overall, this class pays 6% of the assessment. 2 commercial tenants. This is 8% of the board. Overall, this class pays 0% of the assessment. 4 government. This is 16% of the board. Overall, this class pays 0% of the assessment. I will submit this email that has a really detailed breakdown to the commission. As for the new makeup of the area, what's really interesting is when we ran the formulas, it actually mirrors the current makeup of the MetroTech bid pretty closely. So there will be the addition of a large commercial, there will be the addition of a large residential, there will also be the addition of a small residential, which will be an owner-occupied unit. We are also including a cultural seat, non-voting cultural seat on the board that the cultural groups have agreed will rotate amongst them. They felt since they all work together so well already that it makes more sense to have one and that they can just come whenever they want, in addition to this cultural committee that will be deciding the programming. The CB2 question and sort of the history there. So this happened well before Tucker or myself got here. When Tucker came, he inherited what he likes to refer to as the civil wars of downtown Brooklyn. And there was a movement of the board once upon a time that they felt the community board was interfering in what was happening, and they wrote them out. The bid statute does not require a community board representative. It suggests, and it's sort of standard practice, as SBS can attest to. So as part of this process, we've been talking to the community board for a long time. We're very close with them. Rob Parris comes to most of our meetings for the other bids, and typically when we have the bid board meetings, they're one right after another. So it has been strange for Rob to have to leave the room and then come back after. So this was always in the works. This has been something that Tucker's been working for a long time. And as part of this process, we saw this is the ideal opportunity. We're opening up the district plan. We might as well reinsert this. So that will be that the executive committee of the MetroTech board approved that motion last week. We have our annual meeting for the MetroTech bid, and all of our bids tomorrow, at which that will be up for approval, which we have no doubt it will. Finally, there was an administrative question last on Monday about the administrative cost being 45%. That number's a bit misleading. If you take out staff costs and so that's direct salaries, and if you take out the reserve is also included in that, it's actually only 8%. And that was one of the reasons why the MetroTech bid we sort of settled on that, because of the economies of scale of having the Downtown Brooklyn Partnership already operate the bid. You wouldn't have to go back and do a lot of the other kind of administrative costs of hiring, a whole staff. This is really going to be geared towards maintenance personnel and pass-through costs. So it's actually only 8% the admin costs of the actual budget. I think I got everything.
Thank you. Would you please submit the makeup of the board
Yes.
and the assessment to
I'll
us?
email. Can I email? I have it on my email,
Certainly.
so I'll email to.
Certainly.
Definitely.
Questions for Mr. Kalish? Ms. Ortiz?
Hi, thank you for responding to the admin question. I hadn't asked it today, but it was a question I had on Monday. I'm curious about the voting and it sounds like you have some familiarity with the enabling legislation that sets aside the requirements.
Not this much.
Yeah. So you've had to tussle with that, and the issue of governance has come up here today. Could you clarify for me, you mentioned that the cultural institutions have a non-voting seat on the board. Is that because, and I'm not clear on this, and maybe this is an attorney who needs to answer the question, because they do not have, because their contribution is voluntary? Is it that, pay to play? Is that what it is?
As for the actual law, I would defer to SBS, who's coming up right after me. This was just a decision that the board made and the culturals were a part of. They felt that, since they were, let me take a step back there. Our board meetings, if you've ever been to one, which you clearly haven't, they're very open, they're very transparent, and typically people listen to one another, especially the non-voting people. Our cultural groups have been involved in the process from day one. So when they felt that since they were paying the least, that they didn't really deserve to have a voting seat on the board. They didn't want to complicate things. They really felt that, look, we're there as an observer, we're there to help. We know our voice is already heard. We're going to have our voice there. But so that's what they agreed to in the proposal. It wasn't a contentious discussion at all, and if Keith was still here, he could attest to that. But that was something that they proposed. They said, look, we would love to have a board seat. We don't feel that it's necessary that we should have a voting right on the board, because they also know that we're all sort of in lockstep with what each other needs.
Certainly, and I think, because of the individuals that are participating now and the positive energy, that's the case. But, the governance is there and the rules are there in case, the relationship's sour.
Of course, that's just the past example of it.
Yeah, exactly. And, the fact that this is in many respects, a cultural district suggests that the cultural institutions should have a voting seat, and I might argue that, and this gets back to maybe SBS can answer that, if the enabling legislation is such that you have to contribute in order to have a vote, and I'm not sure if that's the case legally, then perhaps an MOU with the cultural institutions where their commitment is firm would enable them to have a voting seat, which might be beneficial for the kind of governance that you might like to see, in a culture, what is effectively a cultural district. You would need them to have a voting seat as opposed to a non-voting.
Yeah, in regards to the MOU, I know that's been brought up a lot about some sort of more formalized agreement in the district plan. Keith and I and the other groups, everyone is on board with that. I think the reason why that wasn't part of this proposal is just because a lot of us were not 100% sure what this is all going to look like yet. I mean, if you stand in front of BAM, it's just green fencing everywhere you look. We don't know how these clauses are going to work. We don't know how to program them yet. And so I think that it was, this was a seed idea. Let's get this moving. Let's get going forward. And then once we sort of get into these clauses and then once we have everything built, we didn't want to constrain ourselves at this moment into an agreement that we might want to make more expansive in the future. So I think everyone is on board with signing something a lot more formal. I think we just want to get to the point where we see what that actually will be versus today when we really can only conjecture.
So I guess the question is just, is a formal agreement, does a voting member of the board require, is there like an assessment required of them? And that's more of a legal question. So.
Yeah, and then exactly. Yeah. And then it's for the board and the steering committee to determine that structure.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Mr. Kalish? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next speaker is from the Department of Small Business Services, Patrick Manick. answer all questions, large and small.
Morning, Commissioners. My name is Patrick Kamak. I'm the Director of Bid Development, the Department of Small Business Services. Really, I just wanted to sign up in case there were any outstanding questions. I think I can speak maybe a little bit. I'm not a lawyer myself, but I can speak a little bit to the question that came up that an assessment is not required to have a voting representation on the board. As you can see, there are 4 elected officials on every board, and they do not vote. Residential tenants have voting rights on a board. They do not pay an assessment to a bid. So it's not a requirement to have voting right on a bid, if that answers. Sorry.
Any questions to Mr. Kamek?
Mr. Chairman, just to
Mr.
maybe help.
Cirillo and then Ms.
Just to help clarify, and I'm just going to affirm the statement that the requirement of paying an assessment is not a requirement to be elected to the board. As somebody who has non-assessment paying board members, I know that is not a legal prohibition to being elected to the board. I would also assume, based on this last discussion, that even if there was an agreement by the culturals not to have a seat, that really refers to identifying a new class that would provide an opportunity for a cultural to fit into that slot. With that said, I'm also assuming there would be nothing to prohibit a cultural institution under the existing district plan and perhaps bylaws if a cultural fit into one of the other categories, such as the tenant, to seek nomination through whatever the bylaws process would be for this bid and election in its typical process of being a bid. So, I'm assuming that's correct. Am I correct?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Everything you said.
So,
thank you.
So, and the reason I say that is because we get all of these categories. I'm not a huge fan of the categories, but I understand it, 'cause I have 2, with 3. I have owners, I have, tenants, and it's all one big, mishmash. It's an old bid. And we didn't get so specific, although I realize with changing neighborhoods, it's important to ensure, so I accept this and recognize the benefit of creating categories now that are more specific for equity purposes and contribution purposes to ensure, and I also know politically they're important because as the communities are determining whether or not these are important for them, everybody wants to make sure they have a voice at the table, and so I get that. But I just, if I'm right, then I'm glad that I have my head wrapped around this too, because I think it's important for us to realize, with or without a category, there is always the potential to have representation by a variety of interests and stakeholders that may not have a specific column for themselves, but yet they fall into a bigger pool of population that could be represented at the table.
Indeed.
So clearly that wasn't a question, but a clarity, if nothing else.
Ms. Ortiz.
Yes. I'm fine.
Ms. Efron.
In your experience with all the bids, is there any bid that has a good formula for cultural participation, voluntary or otherwise?
We could get back to you if we maybe, but as far as we know, there's not, like we said before, this is maybe one of the newer, more rare examples of, cultural involvement, and a lot of culturals being located in one particular bid. So this is, new territory, like we said.
Yeah, I would just say, just to follow on what Mr. Cirillo said. There are, as we know, statutory categories for bid membership, but most responsible bids will try to incorporate into those categories representation of that broadly speaking represents the broader community. So to speak from my own experience, which is at the Downtown Alliance, those categories are fixed by statute, but there was always one commercial tenant on the board was the Lower Manhattan Cultural Council, for the very reason that you wanted to have cultural representation, if at all possible. And so I guess, and for the most part, and I think good practice would indicate that as almost as a waterfall, if you have as is required to have commercial owners represent a majority of the board, you'd want, whenever possible, owners who lived in the district or commercial tenants who lived in the district. And you're required to have one resident, but if that resident also fit into a broader category of various kinds of, that's always desirable. And so my question to you and to SBS is, broadly speaking, does the representation of the Metrotech bid board, both current and anticipated by this expansion, broadly speaking, represent the district as a whole? And is it in line with the kind of representation that we see in bids throughout the city?
Yes, I would say absolutely. I think, and just to add on, I was speaking more to this as being a new territory with cultural involvement on the bid, as Commissioner Weisbrod and Commissioner Cirillo talked about. We encourage bids to go typically beyond the state enabling classes of membership and board representation, if it means that that would keep out certain voices in bids. We obviously want all bids to be very transparent and engaging with the entire community. So if there's an institution or whether it's cultural or educational or some stakeholder that is another class, is what we usually, that's what typically what a community board fits in, is usually another class that's not enabled by this state enabling legislation. So we encourage all bids to do this, and we see this in a lot of bids, that there's another class created to involve those stakeholders that are not captured already.
Ms. Ortiz.
Thank you. I had some time to sort of reflect. I think one of the reasons why I'm pushing on the issue of the cultural institutions is because, as you mentioned, in many ways this is precedent setting. This is one of the first bids that, albeit you mentioned there are 9 parcels, but there's $350 million of impact. And you had someone come up just momentarily, a minute ago, who said that, this is why people come there, because of the cultural institutions. This is sort of the city's first cultural improvement district, so to speak. And so, the idea that the classes, if we can incorporate in the district plan a class that recognizes that, in some ways, if this is a unique and a first and it's precedent setting, we should establish a precedent that encourages a class that is reflective of really the element of the brand of this district, not just in case, if they happen to be a member of another class, but actually say, this is a cultural, this is a bid in part because it's a cultural district, and we want to encourage that. And not only do they contribute, but they contribute not just voluntarily, but, it's part of our expectation of them, and it's memorialized in some sort of legal document in form of an MOU, and they have a voting seat at the table. I mean, I think that's the precedent that in some ways I'm personally seeking to see here, and would be excited to see as part of the district plan, because that's really what's going to guide the execution of this. So that's sort of the perspective that I bring to the table, and I guess why I keep on, pushing on the cultural piece.
Right, absolutely. I think it's a great point and something, we can work more with the bid on. As Commissioner Cirillo, mentioned, there's a potential for if culture institution does fit in with, a voting class that's enabled by the statute. I think there's definitely potential for, to think about how that could be incorporated, but it's something we're definitely willing to work with the bid on, and we want every voice heard, and to particularly, note and this particular, why this area is so great because of these cultures involved.
I would just say that I think generally acknowledge that best practice now certainly is that community boards are represented on bid boards as, generally speaking, as an institution, as a non-voting member, and I applaud that that will once again happen here. But I assume that is something that SBS will continue to monitor, because obviously good relations between local bids and their community boards are crucial to the bids and the community boards achieving their full potential.
Absolutely, we will.
Ms. Leffen.
This whole line of conversation has caused me to think about the three educational institutions that have been previously called out as important members of this party, and I'm looking at the draft of the district plan that we're being asked to approve here, and it does have a paragraph that says, describes the contractual obligations that those three educational institutions have to provide cash or services, which in total will equal 10% of the total budget. And then the next paragraph is about the culturals, and it does indicate that their commitment is to be memorialized in a memorandum of understanding. I think we've been a little wishy-washy about whether there will be one or there won't be one, but at least the draft of the district plan contemplates that there will be one. And I guess I then wonder, this is not a question for you so much as a question I should have asked earlier, what's the relationship between the educational institutions as a category and the culturals as a category? It seems to me they're similarly situated as important additional constituents to the bid. And they're not even, I guess they don't have a seat. I don't know if they show up to meetings, what their role in the proceedings is. Not so much a question for you as for us to figure out and follow up perhaps.
Yeah, it would be helpful, I think, if you could, not only Mr. Kalish indicated and read off the categories of members on the bid board and the categories expected in expansion. It would be helpful if SBS could submit literally who are the board members and what institutions they represent.
Absolutely.
Okay, any other questions for Mr. Comack? Hearing none. As you can tell, this is a very intriguing topic for this commission. Is there anyone else who wishes to be heard on this matter? I don't know why anyone would wish to be heard, but hearing none, the hearing is closed. Okay.
Borough of Manhattan, calendar number 20, CD3 N150317HAM. A public hearing in the matter of an application for a UDAB designation and project approval of city-owned property concerning 269 Henry Street.
The first speaker is Vernon Simmons.
Who's gone home?
I'm sorry, is it, what's your first name?
Vianda.
Vianda Simmons. Pardon me. Okay.
Good afternoon, Chairman Weisbrod, Vice Chair Knuckles, and City Planning Commissioners. My name is Vianda Simmons, as stated earlier, and I'm the Deputy Director of Manhattan Planning at the New York City Department of Housing, Preservation, and Development. I'm very pleased to testify in support of this non-ULURP UDAP application, designation, and project approval for the disposition of city-owned property. These actions will facilitate the rehabilitation of a former firehouse, particularly FDNY 15, number 15, to be used as community facility space, which will be operated by Henry Street Settlement, a local nonprofit which will provide both social services and health programs to the community. The proposed development is located at 269 Henry Street, which is on the north side of Henry Street, Montgomery Street to the west, and Grand Street to the east, on Block 288, Lot 80, in the Lower East Side neighborhood of Community District 3 in Manhattan. The proposed development will consist of the rehabilitation of over 6,000 square over 6,000 square foot, four-story building with a height of approximately 59 feet. And as stated, the community facility will be operated by Henry Street Settlement for the use as the organization's Neighborhood Resource Center. The Neighborhood Resource Center will provide walk-in services to the community, crisis intervention, legal services, and a host of other invaluable services and resources for the neighborhood, and Henry Street is here to provide more information. The building was used, as stated, by FDNY as a former firehouse and has been vacant since 2002. So this is a long-awaited project, and the community is in full support of this proposed development. And we appreciate your consideration of this ULURP application, and thank you for the opportunity to present today. I am available for a question.
Very efficiently done, Ms. Simmons. Questions? Ms. Delos.
How are you? Can you just talk a little bit about whether or not the city will be receiving anything as part of the disposition, the city being paid at all, or is this a disposition entirely for $1?
No, this is a disposition for $1, and, well, this place, the firehouse, and everyone knows the history, was developed or designated as community facility use as many of the firehouses across several of the boroughs, so.
Do you happen to know what level of capital needs it has in order to bring it up to the proposed use?
In terms of the renovation that's needed, I'll defer that question to Henry Street.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions for Ms. Simmons? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Jeremy Reese.
Hi, I'm Jeremy Reese from Henry Street Settlement. Thank you for hearing our testimony. The firehouse has been a lifeline for the community since the early 1800s. We're looking to make this a lifeline again for the next 100+ years. It's really where we're going to have our Neighborhood Resource Center. We do all of our public benefits screening. We'll have a parent center there. We've actually raised the capital fund to make this work. It's about a $5 million capital renovation. We're really confident that we have, we've been around since 1893, really confident that we have the know-how and the expertise to really run the center on an ongoing basis. Happy to talk a little bit more detail. In addition to the benefit screening, we're also going to have a parenting center, classes for parents in the community. Anyone that doesn't know Henry Street Settlement, we're a major settlement house in the Lower East Side. We've offered a range of educational, health, social services, and arts programming since 1893, serve over 60,000 people a year. Really excited about moving forward with this project. It's really a privilege for us to be in a position to be able to add this to our campus in the Lower East Side, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions, Mr. Reese? Ms. Levin and then Ms. Delos.
Yes, I guess you mentioned the services that you're anxious to provide from this facility. Are those going to be new programs that you're able to create as a result of having this, or is this new locations?
There's services that we already provide, that we provided for a long time. It's at another site on East Broadway. It's not ADA certified where we are now, so we're looking to move into an ADA certified building. We'll also, everything is culturally competent. We have staff that speak Spanish, Chinese, and we'll continue to do so. So there are programs that have been running that will move in. It'll also be, we're also looking at it because of the accessibility, where it'll be, we have 17 sites in the Lower East Side now, so this will be essentially our, point of entry for everyone, and we'll refer people out to education, workforce development, and other services.
Okay, so then what will happen at the East Broadway site where the,
Unsure yet. We own the East Broadway site, and we're
so will that continue to be in your portfolio and you'll just figure out what to do with it, or?
possibly, we're considering kind of real estate options or service options.
Okay, and could I ask also just if you could elaborate a little bit more on the design of what's shown on the plans as the multi-service space? The little plan, that's coming up later.
Yeah, I would actually defer to my colleague Renee Epps, our Chief Facilities Officer. I don't know if she should jump up here?
No.
No, but she's coming,
Great.
Her turn will come. Ms. Delos and then Ms. Efron.
Jeremy, it's good to see you. I was actually going to ask the same question about whether or not these are expanded services or shifting over.
Yeah, this is our single stop site, as you know, I'm sure well.
Yes.
So our single stop site will move into the firehouse, as well as our parent center, which we started after 9/11 to offer a range of services for parents in the community.
Great.
Mommy and me classes, parents, for parents with teens. We offer ACS mandated, programming as well for parents to get their kids back who are in the foster care system.
Great.
So those services will be offered here, but it's a little bit bigger than our current space. So we're also using it as a main endpoint, center for where we're going to refer out to other services as well.
That's great. I mean, it's a great space, and it's great that you all are stepping up to help preserve it and really bring it back to its glory.
It's beautiful. Yeah, and our headquarters are right here. We've been there since 1893, as I said.
Great.
Ms. Efron.
Thanks. Henry Street has such a varied group of buildings and wide geography downtown, and as it becomes a more popular tourist destination in the immediate surrounding neighborhood, is there any plan to have a sign that explains how a firehouse ended up being a multi-service center?
That's a very good question. I'll let Renee take that.
Ms. Young.
Hi, thank you. This looks like a wonderful project, and I was wondering if you could speak a little bit to any of your sustainability goals. I assume that not being a residential building, that this is not subject to HPD's usual green policy, but I imagine you may have other things in mind.
I'll let Renee take that as well, but just to say that we are a demonstration project with the Municipal Art Society now to green our historic headquarters, so sustainability and, making sure all of our sites are sustainable is really important to us.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Reese? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, the next speaker is Renee Epps. Everything has been passed to you, Ms. Epps.
I hope I can
All
do
on
justice
you.
to your question. Good afternoon. I'm Renee Epps. I'm with Henry Street Settlement. I'm the Chief Officer for Facilities, and I've been working on this project for a number of years with HPD, and I thank them for all of their efforts and the stewardship that they've provided. And then I'm joined by Emma Leonard, who's from Buyer Blender Bell, the architect that we've retained for the project. And I don't have any other remarks. I'm happy to answer any questions.
I think there were a bunch of questions that that Mr. Reese suggested we ask you, and
Right.
I think the first one was from Ms. Delos, as I remember.
Actually, no, I think it was, mine was on a programming.
About the multipurpose room.
Maybe from Ms. Levin, no?
Yeah, well, I guess it was. I'm waiting my turn. If you could describe to us a little bit how the multi-space function on the ground floor will work. The plan shows little seats set up in a row, but I gather that they won't always be set up in a little row.
No, we're looking for.
What kind of events will happen there and how will you use it?
Well, the space that we're currently in now for the Neighborhood Resource Center is about 1,500 square feet smaller than the space that we're going to be moving into in the firehouse. One of the things that we wanted to be able to have was a space that could be flexible for a variety of different meetings and events, either surrounded directly connected to the programs that we're offering during the day, or if there are other neighborhood groups, or if Henry Street is also then wanting to have other open forum events. So creating a space that's as flexible as possible for community use was the goal in this programming.
So it'll just mostly function as a big empty space that can be set up for...
Yes.
Now, Ms. Delos, I
No?
believe.
No.
No? Ms. Efron, pardon me.
Appreciate that.
Just whether or not there will be any signage explaining the history of the site
Yes,
for passersby.
we're going to be keeping the pole inside as a part of the feature and being able to explore that history. We're very interested in exploring the history of the firehouse and also exploring and honoring, of course, the donors that are making this a reality. But one of the things that we've been looking at, both for 265 Henry Street, so our main headquarters, and then I think can be extrapolated over to the firehouse, is doing some additional interpretation on the history of Henry Street and of the neighborhood as well.
Great. There are so many cultural institutions that have a good sense of how to create signage or others explaining the history of that neighborhood that might be good allies.
Yes, absolutely, and I think that we've been partnering with a number of them as we've been exploring just the preliminary history within our headquarters, for example, the Tenement Museum and, of course, City Lore and other organizations. So, yes, we've got lots of good company on the Lower East Side.
Ms. Zhang.
Would you be able to speak to some of your sustainability goals for this rehab?
We've just been in sort of strategic planning, preliminary planning as far as where we are going. Obviously, that is a goal for Henry Street. The more that we're able to direct our funding to providing services as opposed to paying utility bills, of course, that's a major goal of ours, and we've been exploring that throughout our sites over the last 5 years since I've been on board at Henry Street. But I don't have any particular details at this time.
Okay, great.
But thank you for raising that up.
Any other questions from Ms. Epps? Emma Leonard?
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I just wanted to be available for questions.
Emma Leonard is from Bible and DeBell.
Yes, the architect for the project.
Any? Ms. Dela-Us, then Ms. John.
So I have to ask about the fire pole. So which space is it going to be a part of? Is it part of the parenting piece? I'm just wondering how it's going to be incorporated, and I'm just curious.
It'll actually be by the front desk, so sort of as you enter, you'll get to see it and experience it.
Great.
Ms. John.
Hi. So while recognizing that it sounds like you're fairly early in your design, do you have any, speaking from as an architect and from sort of a technical perspective, do you have some benchmarks that are appropriate for this kind of space that you're heading toward?
We haven't really looked into that yet, but we will be looking into more efficient windows. The windows are going to be replaced as part of the project, so that on a building like this will be a big impact, and then also efficient mechanical systems, since those will also be new. We haven't hit or set out specific benchmarks yet.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Ms. Leonard? Thank you, Ms. Leonard.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to be heard on this application? Not, the hearing is closed.
Okay, Borough of Queens, calendar number 21, CDs 1 and 2, N150141ZRQ. A public hearing in the matter of an application for an amendment of the zoning resolution concerning Bright Horizons Children's Center.
First speaker is Frederick Becker.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. My name is Frederick Becker. I'm here on behalf of Bright Horizons for a text amendment to facilitate the operation of a child daycare center to be operated by Bright Horizons at the subject location. The Long Island City Subdistrict has 55 block fronts which have special regulations. 52 of these block fronts allow anything but residential, commercial, and/or community facility. There are 3 block fronts at issue here. Here, and which only allow commercial uses, not community facility. Our property, which is on the corner of 28th Street and Queens Plaza South, has a mixed zoning. The first 100 feet of the block does allow the community facility use, and the remaining 39 feet does not. Our site is located within that 139 feet. We have 100 feet as of right, and there's one classroom or one space, if you will, that is not within that. So we have proposed the text change to make this, facilitate this use and to make the zoning more appropriate for the area, especially given the changing use of the neighborhood. We have met with Community Board 1, Community Board 2, the Queensborough President, and the Borough Board. We have received unanimous support at all 4 locations. They thought this was a very good use for the area, and no other issues were raised. I do understand from the previous review session and as well as discussion with various commissioners, there have been concerns with the operation of this in terms of noise and in terms of the safety of the children. With regard to noise, we've gone through extensive noise testings through environmental. We are working with acoustical engineers to meet the noise standards. There is an E designation on this site, so the windows will be appropriately enhanced, if you will, to make for allow to appropriate noise within the, or lack of noise within the facility. With regard to the safety of the children, it should first be noted that in order to allow this facility to operate, we are licensed, or the facility is licensed by the New York City Department of Health. They do a viability checklist, and they have gone through that, where they do both an interior and exterior analysis of the location in terms of the nature of what's happening with inside, how it is affected by what's happening outside, and also they walk the area. We have gotten approval from the Department of Health to locate a facility at this site. We have also been, I have with me people from Bright Horizons who have been working on this project for 3 years, who are very familiar with the location. All children must be walked into the facility. They do not allow drop-offs. They expect the majority of people who come to the facility will be walking to the facility using public transportation. In order to get into the facility, there is a lock. It is not an open door. It has to be, you have a punch code to put in. So, wrapping it up, if I will, we submit this as a good idea. We believe we have addressed the issues of safety, the children's concerns, acoustical, and we request your support. Thank you.
Thank you. And my understanding is the Department of Health itself is a major occupant of this building?
They are as well, correct.
So you have to watch yourself.
The eyes of the DOH are upon us.
Indeed.
Yes.
Questions for Mr. Becker? Any? Thank you very much.
Mr. Geller, I'm sorry.
Mr. Knuckles.
I'd just say, one of my two grandsons was a user of Bright Horizons when they were in, you had a branch in the World Financial Center, I think until recently.
We're all over. We're the Starbucks of daycare center.
Highly regarded.
Yes.
He was quite satisfied.
That's all that matters. Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Chair.
His children are going to go there. His grandchildren are going to go there.
They hope so. The next speaker, by the way, Mr. Geller, is here only to answer questions. You need not speak unless you have questions for him.
So any questions for either, Ms. Levin?
Well, this could be either for Mr. Becker or for Mr. Geller. I'm just curious to know the anticipated client base. Will it be families who live in the area, or is it there's such a number of offices around? Will it be families who come to work in the area and it's convenient to have daycare where you work?
These children will be approximately 100 children who will be at this facility. I think it's anticipated that a large majority will be coming from within the area. That's not 100 is not a lot given the number of units in the area. It's a great location where children will be effectively dropped off. Parents will get onto the subways and then go to work.
And go, right.
So I think I mean, there may be some who will come from a little further afield, but I think it's primarily for residents. in the
Local
area.
residents, okay. Thank you.
Ms. Ortiz.
Hi, this may be a question for Mr. Geller. You know, I recognize that we're very space constrained in New York, and outdoor amenities are a luxury in some cases. That said, you know, it's wonderful when children have an opportunity to go outside. Is there, you know, is it envisioned that they will be taken to a local park, or is there any outdoor opportunity at all at this location, whether on-site or off-site?
Mr. Geller will come and answer that question.
I thought so, thank you.
Is there another?
Mr. Geller, could you just step up and introduce yourself?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. I'm Stephen Geller. I'm the Director of Design and Pre-Construction for Bright Horizons. We are currently right now working with licensing to find a safe place to bring the children to, which we are required to, and if not, we do have a movement matter zone inside the building, within our space for the children's activities.
Could you clarify the requirement that you referenced?
We're supposed to have a space where children can play.
Oh, but
Whether it
not
be- whether it be-
necessarily
Whether it
outside.
be indoor or outdoor.
Got it.
We have a space within our space called the Movement Matter Zone where the kids have to have activities. There's a ballet bar, there's a climbing wall, and they do all different types of activities to stay
Okay,
active.
so for clarification, at this time, there's no envisioned outdoor space associated with this?
That's correct. We're working with the DOB right now, the DOH. Is that correct?
To find outdoor
To
space?
find an outdoor space to go to.
Okay, would that be in close proximity on site or where?
Yes, and wherever the closest place is. That they'll let us go to.
Thank you.
Any other questions for either Mr. Becker or Mr. Geller? Hearing none, is there anyone else who wishes to be heard on this matter? Hearing none, this hearing is closed. Thank you very much. Is there any other matter before us, Madam Secretary?
No, Chairman Weisbrod. It is over.
I will entertain a motion to adjourn. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Okay.
I think your grandson clinched it for the.
Yeah. Yeah, Tracy's older boy. Alex, he's 4.05. For about 2 years. His first when he was, I guess, 2, 3. She would bring him down, he would drop him off at World Financial Center. Come across it. So, yeah. And she used to tell me how great she thought it was. Yeah.
That's a great reputation.
Yeah. Okay, all right. Did I tell you?